Chapter 1147. Wang Ling sensed that something wasn't right with Xia Ming. Sweeping his king's eye up and down, he immediately sensed an evil shadow enveloping Xia Ming. And Wang Ling was the only one who could see this shadow. He was well aware that it was a curse. It wasn't that there was no way to break the curse, but everyone was going through the security check now, so it wasn't convenient for Wang Ling to do it. He could only wait for the right time to break the curse. Although Xia Ming had been rude to him before, Wang Ling had no intention of doing anything to him. After all, they were classmates, and now that they had come out to win glory for the school, there was no conflict that couldn't be resolved. Besides, breaking the curse was as easy as lifting a finger for Wang Ling. If there was a reason, it was that Wang Ling felt that the curse on Xia Ming was too vicious. It was a curse that involved people and had a linkage mechanism. As long as Xia Ming violated the terms of the contract, the curse would immediately take effect. Generally speaking, apart from the person who had signed the contract, the curse would also target Xia Ming's blood relatives. Thus, Wang Ling felt that Xia Ming was most likely being threatened. So the question now was, who on earth had signed this contract with such a vicious curse? This was another question in front of him. When the last person from number 60 high passed through the security check, the Balanced Flame Middle School students were collectively stopped at security gate number 2. A teacher in red from the resident special forces stepped forward and divided them to one side for a manual inspection. Why do we have to do a manual inspection? Several Balanced Flame Middle School students were puzzled. You've been reported, so behave. The teacher in red spoke resolutely, and then began to search them carefully. In the end, they really did find a problem. In the pocket of one of the Balanced Flame Middle School students' uniforms, they actually found a very well-hidden space mezzanine, which was protected against machine scanning. After opening the mezzanine, they found that it was full of banned items for this competition. Student, you can remain silent now. Whether you know it or not, rules are rules, and you've now been disqualified. The teacher in red was impartial, and caught him red-handed on the spot as he took the Balanced Flame Middle School boy away. The boy was stupefied and had no idea what on earth had happened. The result was just as Headmaster Chen had predicted. The students of Balanced Flame Middle School were a bunch of nerds who wouldn't do anything illegal, but their principal, Zhuo Qingqiu, had secretly tried to get the students to bring in more supplies, and then he was discovered. Do you think it was the headmaster who did it? A few people from number 60 high whispered among themselves. Headmaster Chen's original plan had been for the members of No. 60 high to make a public report during the test so that Balanced Flame Middle School would be the first to lose members, and the other is called. But after some thought, Headmaster Chen felt that a public report would make it easier for the other schools to focus fire on him. Student Wang Ling has 3 songs. So he changed the plan to have Headmaster Chen personally write a report letter to President Xi in secret. There is no doubt that Balanced Flame Middle School was in 2020 in the command center. Everyone had to hear the headmaster of Balanced Flame Middle School. I'm very sorry, Student Xiang. He looked control his emotions at this point, but couldn't find who had written. As Wang Ling's little cotton pad jacket down to Rajul was naturally found out taking care of him. Zhuo Qingqiu believed that his however detailed conference very so someone must have blame on him this time. Should I call him first of all? Too shameless. Were restricted to the command center. And secondly, even if he fought sure enough, if he dies from a heart attack, you can come back to life immediately. Human devil was too strong. There was no way Ajua could deal with him. The headmaster of the number 1 domain was well versed in the law, gloated on the scapegoat. Lotus was well aware that even if he could more or less guess Wang Ling still fall as soon as he said that. It was fine as he stole a glance at Headmaster Chen. Wang Ling rubbed all the lawyer's expression. He didn't know why, but his words had stirred up Headmaster Chen sides not throwing senior. It's already 91 news from the Mahjong team. Little so such a disgraceful method like reporting. Mahjong suddenly saw a figure with green hair. I strongly condemn and protest on behalf of Headmaster Chen felt that the image on the screen was a little familiar, but he couldn't quite place it today. Absolutely, I won't have to worry about this was the first time that the high at the meeting back then had arranged a strategy. No one would have heard Headmaster of number 60. I have to admit, Chen would actually cultivate into a very warm in a short period. Not only was he very difficult to deal with, he was also a little silver were supposed to act. On the other side, Louis Toad was the only one with emotion, which was probably Chen's operation a little holy beast identity. Let me finish reading. Headmaster Chen was on vigilant like the old Wang's eye. And many headmasters on the other side don't think that I won't be too familiar with immediately attacking President Xi. The Immortal King is Mr. Cheng's group of copies members of the other strategic schools communications. Don't you know that everyone had agreed to focus fire write a book in the third now that they were down one person? You didn't remember this name on the list. It was definitely 2 days ago. Because you stay at home every day in the third volume to Huang become a mother battle for survival. It's like you can't even fit into the women's clothes school as a year. There is a hidden list among the immortal king's magic array, which was personally appointed by the head of state. The magic array will don't know about this. And all the students in this grade will take notice because you drew random locations on 9. What surprises me the most is that there's actually a state is on guard against our members on a mountain peak with a mahjong. The purpose of this invisible list is to catch them off guard. Pitch black cloaks and mahjong nodded and to conceal their identities. As executive by head of state, there are actually a lot of devils so far cited. The master of information wanted to explain to everyone after the immortal since it was a hidden member successfully appointed by the head of state. Thank you very much. Early in the morning, 9 Dragon Mountain gave off a rainbow. 2019 immortal. This was 9 Dragon Mountain. He's one of the office of strategic and which was used to maintain the balance has the strength of an purify the air and water impurity. Furthermore, the opponent's cultivation technique has a powerful restraining effect on evil spirits. While this rainbow fog he was able to eliminate the human devil when it was harmful to the human body. If a person absorbed too much of it, it would be like a thirsty person drinking seawater to become even thirstier. Finally understood the whole story in their body and would be drained away by the rainbow fog. Thank you, Mr. Chonger, for helping out this time. And the others were in charge of hunting down the dark demon members who had attempted to destroy the scene this time. The entire 9 Dragon Mountain and the others were sure that the mastermind behind this mess would definitely make a move today. Toad's alias at that moment, they stood on a mountain peak. It was in fact the side terrain of the 9 Dragon dismantled and reassembled. At the same time, they were using their well aware that very few people knew about its human form. Not letting go of any trace of evil also helped to hide one's identity. The old devil suddenly sensed something familiar. Throwing senior immortal had already helped him get his ID card ready. Now he was a dog with a proper identity. Furthermore, his household registration was in Songhai Circle's mask said. These days, human devil ran around for the sake of a household registration. Devil? Now, even a dog like him could have a household registration. Mansion was originally he could only use the identity of a dog to silently contribute to the human race. This could be considered indeed a little difficult time coming out from behind the scenes. He fell for my trap back then, and I found a chance to injure him. Now that he's resurrected, flatter me. I'm afraid the truth is that I'm not the only one to take credit for this. When Lupi Toad said this, the atmosphere in the command center instantly froze. Chinese name was Xiao raised his head in astonishment. He was one of the few people the old devil who fought on the front line all year round. Him. But the old devil had subtlety in Lupi Toad's words. It was from the information in General Bai's hands that he was the one who arranged everything's death. Lupi Toad said at that moment. Died in the bombing of Divine Level Island. Everyone did not expect. General Bai said, but it was within reason. After listening to the old devil's expressions on the faces of everyone in the command center flickered. And after the old devil's battle turned their gazes to 2 people. Human devil one was number 60 high school's headmaster Chen, and had then fled the other was naturally Adjua, which was known as a paradise for soul formation. How many people in the world could represent this familiar title? Later, the International Alliance of Cultivators, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face, and they had promptly made the decision to eradicate human devil completely, which was also a boost to number 60 high school's morale. Thus, when number 60 high school was renovated and Alliance of Cultivators, the original old stone statue at the school gate would be remodeled into a life-size holy devil suppressing strength is particularly a great blessing for number 60 high school to have produced such a student. He can increase the number of cells in his body. Of number 60 high school, as far as I know, it was impossible for headmaster Chen not more than 25 million souls under everyone's gazes. Headmaster Chen could only shrug his shoulders with an indifferent attitude. Beasts and so on. Everyone, thank you for letting me win. With a slightly nostalgic look high school students have always been convinced that human devil has been resurrected. The group of headmasters immediately felt sour in their heart. I also sensed that there's an unusual phenomenon of spirit plants any reason to refute it. That should be human devil's appearance. Adjua clearly had a vexed expression on his face. This shouldn't be happening with the rainbow mist around. He knew that things would turn out like this in the end. General Bai frowned as his thoughts stirred. Thus, on the other side, as Fire Peak's mental spirit fell silent President Chi directly got in touch with General Bai. Resumed. This was President Chi's spatial layering no one dared to use which allowed all the personnel involved in this operation to establish a separate communication space with him, and gathered all the strength of the 4 magic treasures to communicate on the top of the mountain. They just needed to imagine President Chi's appearance to establish number 60 high school first. 4 people carrying out the same mission starting from below. President Chi could even according to the strategy they had decided to form a local area network. Number 60 high school would still focus on President Chi was currently the only one who could use this kind of powerful mental communication control technique. Full of confidence. Although Wang Ming's mental strength was very strong, he still lacked training. That person and it was too easy for him to overload himself. Xia Ming felt that he already clearly understood what it felt like to possess great power. He still needed to concentrate on cultivating for a very long time, but if he couldn't control this power, and it would eventually hurt the person he liked. I've already found traces of what looks like human devil. Not have this power. I hope the command center can provide assistance. Mountain spirits temporarily stretch out the area where the demonic Xia Ming was stupefied and guide the nearby
He didn't
children
want to
away.
believe that he had single-handedly
President
created
Xi
this
replied
scene.
almost instantly.
Although the mountain spirit
Roger
had
that
already
command
fallen
center
asleep again,
immediately
Xia
set up
Ming
a
no
barrier
longer
to
had the
seal
courage
off
to
the
use
area.
his power. Let's go and take a
He
look.
was afraid that he would
After
lose
doing
control
all
of
this,
it
General
again.
Bai's
Amid his
footsteps shook,
nervousness,
and a huge
Xia Ming
flame
felt
burst
a
out
warm
from under
hand
his
suddenly
feet.
pressed down on
Like
his
a
shoulder.
rocket being launched,
Who was it?
he flew with the old
He
devil
turned his
trio
head
in the
slightly
direction where
and
human
was
devil
surprised
had
to
appeared.
find that it was Wang
On
Ling
the other
standing
side,
behind
the
him.
former tranquil Nine-Dragon Mountain was now broken by the hustle and bustle of the national
Chapter
competition.
1160.
Wang Ling and the others were so strong that they couldn't control
remote
it.
location.
That kind of fear
Although
and
the
trembling
location was a little
involuntarily
off,
emerged.
it was
Wang Ling
undoubtedly
had
good news
experienced
for
this
this
feeling
survival
countless
battle.
times as a child.
There's no one nearby.
Every dark night,
Gu
he would
Xuanji
wake
said
up
after
after
sensing the surroundings.
afraid that he would do something bad after falling
study
asleep.
perception.
After all,
Super
for
Chin was
Wang Ling,
puzzled.
before the Dao
Sort of.
Talisman seal
I'm
had
better
been
at
officially
perception and
researched,
reasoning.
destroying the
Gu
world
Xuanji
with a
said
wave
with
of his
a smile.
hand was nothing difficult.
He had already discussed
Even
it
with the
genuine
Dao Talisman
Wang
seal
Zhen,
now,
Lu
it
Qingyi
didn't
and
mean
the
that
others that
Wang
each of
Ling
them
was
would
truly
play a role
free.
in the team.
His strength
That way,
continued
each
to
of them
grow,
would play their
and
own
one day
role,
it
and it
wouldn't
wouldn't
be
be
easy
Dao
for them to be
Talisman seal's
exposed.
capacity.
Gu Xuanji
Wang
chose
Ling
the
didn't
path
say
of
anything,
perception,
but the moment
Lu
his hand
Qingyi chose
gently
the
touched
path of
Xia
wet
Ming's
nurse.
shoulder,
Their
the Lu
thoughts
family
connected
was
for
a
a split
famous
second.
medical family
In
in
a
the
few
domain
short
of the
seconds,
gods to
Xia
begin
Ming
with.
felt as if he
Jinyuan
could see
chose
Wang
to
Ling's
set up
life.
defensive
The
arrays and the
loneliness
like.
of being
As
invincible
for Wang
caused his
Zhen,
tears to
it was
gush out
relatively simple.
uncontrollably. His
Wang
job was
Ling
to
had
take a
chosen to
beating,
act at this
or to
moment
put it
because he
bluntly,
knew that
was
this
the
was the
MT.
perfect opportunity
Gu
to get
Xuanji
rid of the
redetermined their
rebellion
direction, then
in
led the
Xia
number
Ming's
60
body.
high team
For
forward in
Wang
the
Ling had
jungle.
missed one point.
The rainbow mist
This
on
Eye of
Nine-Dragon
Rebellion
Mountain will
was also
swallow
a
up
type
our
of
spirit
fate
energy,
spell,
and it won't
when
dissipate
Wang Ling
until
had tried
8
to get
o'clock
rid
in
of
the
it,
morning.
his and Xia
Everyone's
Ming's
pay
fate lines
attention
had
to using that
intersected
turtle
for a
breathing
brief moment.
spell.
Not
And it was
only
also
can it
during
hide
this
our
brief
auras,
interaction
it can
that
also
Xia
prevent
Ming
us
knew
from
what kind of
breathing in the
existence
rainbow
Wang
mist.
Ling was on Earth.
Amazing.
The people in school
Super
didn't know
Chin
much
and
about
Hero
him.
Guo marveled
Although
at
their
Gu
fate
Xuanji's
lines had
perception
intersected
ability.
and seemed to have exposed
Everyone's
him.
the same.
Wang Ling
There's
wasn't
always
worried
something
that
Xia
Xia
Ming
Ming
would
would
say
say
anything,
anything, because
Gu
it was all
Xuanji
like
played
a
it off.
dream.
Once
Lotus
the
Sun
fate
said
line
at that
separated,
moment, but while there are no enemies around
be
us,
forgotten.
our location
You
is
won't
still
feel
too
pain
remote
anymore.
It'll be
Wang
very
Ling
difficult
left
for
a
the
comforting
10 of us to
message in
last
Xia
8
Ming's
days
heart.
with just the supplies
As soon
we
as
brought
Wang
in
Ling
and
said
without
this,
any
the
supplies.
Eye of Rebellion
At
curse
that
in Xia
moment,
Ming's
Lotus Sun
abdomen was
said,
uprooted like a
cultivators
festering
could
sore
control
on
the
soles of
consumption
his
of
feet,
energy in their
and then
bodies.
disappeared without
In
a trace.
seclusion,
A
when he came
cultivator
back to
could
go
his
more than
senses,
10
Xia
days
Ming
without
realized
eating
that
or
he was
drinking,
crying,
but it was
but
a
he didn't
different
know what
story
on
when it
earth
came
he
to
had just
strenuous
seen.
activity.
Memories of
Most
the Eye of
importantly,
Rebellion,
the
what that
life-saving
white-haired
golden
youngster had
talisman
threatened
tied
him
to
to
each
do,
of their arms
and the other
actually
side
sped
of
up
Wang
the
Ling that
consumption
no
of
one
their
knew
physical
about.
strength and
He had
abilities.
completely forgotten
Now
all
that
of
their
it.
consumption
But
rate had
Xia Ming
increased,
felt that he
it
had
was no
become
different
normal.
from that of
He
ordinary
no longer
people,
trembled
and
or
they
was
had to
afraid
eat 3
because of
meals
his
a day to
strength.
maintain their
He
physical
didn't even know
strength.
why, but he didn't hate
This
Wang
had been
Ling at all.
deliberately arranged by the
Classmate Wang
officials
Ling,
so that
you?
the students
Xia Ming
participating
had
in the
thought that Wang
competition
Ling
wouldn't
would
be
hate
able
him,
to stay in
but
one
now that
place
he
for
was
long
flinching and
and would
afraid,
have to
it
go
was
out in
Wang
search
Ling
of
who had
food.
appeared behind
The
him at the
officials
first
have set
instant
up
to support
resource
his
points.
back with one hand
Our
and give him
advantage is
warm
that there's
strength.
no one nearby.
No wonder
but we're a
classmate
little
Lotus
far
Sun
from the
likes you
resource
so
points.
much.
Lotus
At
Sun
that
said.
moment, Xia Ming
Resource
looked at
points?
Wang Ling and couldn't
Is that
help
so?
sighing.
Hero
Classmate Wang
puzzled.
Ling, I've
The
decided
back
to give
page
up
of the
my fight
booklet
with
with the
you.
precautions for
Student
checking in
Lotus
the room
Sun
has a
indeed
map of
deserves
the
someone
area
better.
around Nine-Dragon Mountain, and the resource points are already
Xia
on
Ming
it.
stared at
You
Wang
actually
Ling
didn't
with
see
an
them?
unwavering gaze as he
Lotus
spoke
Sun
righteously,
had a helpless
making
expression
Wang
on her
Ling
face.
feel inexplicably
She made
alarmed.
a hand seal and mist gathered
Why did
in
he
the
give
air.
it to me? Wang Ling
Lotus
was
Sun
dumbstruck.
cultivated a water
If you don't
spell,
fight for it,
and
who am
wherever
I
there
going
was
to use
mist,
as a
she
shield
could
for that
condense it
last
into
defeat?
future, and then condense
Wang
it
Ling
into
never
water.
thought that when he had
After
just
the water
casually
screen
helped
was
remove an
completed,
evil curse,
Lotus
he would
Sun
suddenly
displayed
gain
the
an
map
other
she had
fan.
obtained from the
There was
dormitory
indeed a
in front
spell
of
in his
everyone.
30,000 great
Hero
paths
looked
that
at the
could
map and
forcibly turn
analyzed
people
it.
into fans
There
and
are a
chase
total
after
of
them
20
like
resource
idols.
points on the
This
map,
spell was the
and
great
we're 60
fan spell,
kilometers
but
away from
because
the
Wang
nearest
Ling didn't use it often. Moving forward stealthily will greatly slow us down. If he used too much strength when arrive without being exposed, the fan would completely there's a high chance that someone else will snatch this batch of resources first. The kind who could find out where your home was that in guerrilla warfare like this, we have to secretly take photos of you bathing. When the enemy because stops, his relationship with Xia Ming had been a little strained before, we attack them. Wang Ling when the enemy advances, we retreat. Great fan when the enemy retreats, but in view of the bug in this great Dao, I think it's better to lie in ambush and snatch other people's resources than to go to the resource points to snatch squatting in his house every day taking photos of his life. There was suddenly a violent rumble in the jungle. Fan of him. Gu Xuanji hurriedly felt that it might have something to do with fate. 10 kilometers southwest, when two people's fates were connected, it would probably produce an effect similar to the Great Fan spell, Lu Qingyi was a little which would reconcile those contradictions through the fetters of fate. Wang Ling had a helpless expression on his face. This was the only plausible explanation. He wondered if it was really okay for Gu Xuanji and this group of people to be so serious. At that moment, there was a shout from all around number 60 High's impregnable defensive barrier. In the dense forest, as number 60 High approached, the noise in front of them grew louder and the captain of Titan High School, just as Gu Xuanji had expected. Forming representatives of two different schools all kinds of spells to bombard number 60 High's collided with each other. It looked very dangerous, but in reality they had a clear division of labor. And the others had worked together to set it up. They weren't going all out. These people were very still thinking about what to do next and wanted to save some strength. They used a kind of barrier. This sudden encounter was just a test of each other. This kind of ultra-thin barrier was naturally less resilient below the foundation establishment stage, and really was adjusted the barrier's recovery ability. Their fists and feet were too weak. In other words, while this ultra-thin barrier looked very twice as fast, it was in fact in a flashy pink uniform and the other in a purple uniform. No matter how these people concentrated their fire, it felt hiding like they were just one breath away from breaking the barrier in front of him through a crack. Those who played with tactics had dirty hearts. Hero Wang Ling sighed with emotion. There were really too many schools participating this time, and others had learned, and a lot of them were from other places. Lying low from him. Even a gossipy little expert like him would find it hard to recognize all the schools. Concentrated their fire. While the two of them were talking softly for more than 10 minutes, the main force of the two teams chose to stop at that moment, and the noisy jungle regained its momentary calm. Considering the problem of spirit energy consumption, they had no choice but to retreat for the time being and sit cross-legged to regulate their breathing. When we fight here, what's going on? And it's nothing more than a waste of energy. Barrier can't be broken. When the sandpiper and the clam can be broken, the fisherman benefits. I feel like we're just a little bit away every time. Catch wind of this and come over to take advantage of the situation. Number 60 high was indeed a tough nut to crack. I suggest that we stop. At the very least, it was much more difficult than they had imagined. On the other side, the captain of the team in the purple uniform also stepped forward when he heard the suggestion. Looking at the number of survivors projected from the top of the mountain dome, Nanishio and the others instantly felt a strong sense of crisis. Why don't we form an alliance here? If this went on and they didn't have enough try to survive to replenish themselves, if we get separated later, we'll fight on our own. Either number 60 high would counterattack, or the other teams that had come here would swallow them up. Let's form an alliance. This isn't good. May I ask which school brother is wearing this flashy pink uniform? Furthermore, I'm from Guangxi City West number 8 High School, which urgently needed to be treated with good herbs. From Guangxi? Although Nanishio knew some medical skills, they clearly weren't enough. So it's a fellow cultivator from Purple Garden High School. Everyone at the foot of the mountain instantly looked a little helpless. Is a famous but it was at that moment that they actually saw a paper plane fly down from the top of the mountain. Watching as the two schools who had been fighting fiercely actually started to discuss forming an alliance. He opened it to see what was written on it. Didn't quite understand how this plot was developing. You can consider joining us and forming an alliance. With the intention of reaping the benefits of a third party. In the end, the two schools had formed an alliance. What does it say? This situation was disadvantageous. It says we can join them and form an alliance together. At that moment, but there's a condition, said Nanishio. Wang Ling could feel evil spirit chi twining around his fingertips. Wang Ling's fan club. In other people's eyes, this spirit chi might look very pure, but in Wang Ling's eyes, it was simply Chapter filthy. 1161. While he could indeed sense that this was exactly Xiao Ming's idea, Wang Ling was well aware that right away power didn't gaining the support of the vast majority of the team. Constantly thinking about it wasn't that there weren't people who opposed it, such as Super Chin. But the evil spirit chi on one hand, he felt that setting up a personal more powerful than he had imagined, and on the other hand, he vaguely felt that Wang Ling actually had now begun to corrode his behavior. Just like a rotten fruit, if even the core started to rot, Wang Ling felt that Super Chen was extremely troublesome. But the problem was that most of the people in this team were his fans, which didn't belong to him. In a situation where the minority had to obey the majority, Super Chen's veto naturally had no effect. As if he was being manipulated, Wang Ling's fan student punched a girl in a flashy pink school uniform from 8 City West High School. Was a little dazed. Boom. He searched his memories and realized that he couldn't recall any details about Wang Ling. This punch had actually directly broken through her protective golden talisman. He wouldn't crashed into several trees in the air before coming to a stop. To Wang Ling that he had the manipulated boy was instantly stupefied. But after Zhu Hanyun's reminder, furthermore, a lot of people started to remember. Xiao Ming's punch had been so unusually strong that even the boy himself hadn't expected mascot. Even if he had used all his strength around and saw the rules for joining Wang Ling's fan club to have such explosive power. What are you doing? Join this fan club and you'll get the God of Exams halo. The captain of 8 City West High School flew into a rage on the spot. 2. You hadn't expected Purple Garden High School to actually go back on their classmate Wang Ling. It wasn't me, my body moved involuntarily. You must protect the mascot's personal safety. There must be a misunderstanding. 4. The boy who betrayed this fan sullen and helpless expression failing a subject and will have trouble in any competition or exam. The two schools who had already decided to form an alliance 2 yuan and started fighting again. If you don't pay, you will be punished in accordance with rule number 4. As if he was very satisfied with his masterpiece. In any competition or even exam? Super Chin and Hero Guo were horrified by this operation. Some people questioned the authenticity of these rules. Xiao Ming wasn't what that should strong. We do? Why did it look like he was on steroids? There's no other way. Xiao Ming, can't ignore Brother Zhu's hand injury. Super Chin couldn't help join first. Of
Number
course.
60 High's
Xia
classmate
Ming was
Lotus
immensely
Sun is the
pleased with
young
himself.
master of Huagua
This
Water
feeling
Curtain
of power
Group.
made him feel
She
very
knows how to
comfortable,
mix elixirs,
especially
and
when
should
he
be
able
able
to
to
help
help
Brother
Zhou
Zhu's
in front
arm
of
recover
Lotus Sun
quickly,
just now, said
which had
Nanny
made him
Shu.
feel even more
Although
satisfied.
there were still some people in
as
the
long
crowd
as he
who
had
weren't
this
willing
power,
to join,
yes,
it was
as
fine
long
as
as he
the
had this
captains
power,
of each school
he could
made the
even
final
help number
decision.
60 High School
They
win
had to
first
listen to the
place.
captain's commands,
As long as he
and
used
if this
something
power
really
well
went
and
wrong,
performed
the
well in
captains
front
would
of
take the
classmate
blame.
Lotus Sun.
It was only the
What was
first day
Wang
of
Ling
the
to
survival battle.
As Xia
No
Ming
one fantasized about the future
so quickly.
His confidence
So
grew
a few
stronger
minutes
than
later,
ever.
the captains
But
of the
Super
four
Chin
schools
still
came
persisted
together
in
and used
asking,
magic to
"Did you
weave
take
Morse
drugs?"
code to send a signal of surrender.
Xia Ming flatly
Then a
denied
group of
it.
people began
Can't
to
you
go
think
up
of
the
me a
mountain.
little better?
Most of the
It's all
40-odd
about bringing
people
glory
didn't
to
believe
our
in the
school.
regulations themselves.
Of course I miss
In
you, but you're
particular,
so strong
Nanny
now.
Shu felt that
I'm
this was
very
nothing
puzzled.
more than a game.
Therefore, I think there are only two possibilities.
As long as
First,
they
you've
rested
always
and
been hiding a
reorganized
trump
themselves,
card.
they
Either
would
you've been
immediately
hiding
launch
something
something
or you've been possessed by a holy devil.
High.
Thus,
After
at
Super
this
Chin
moment,
said this,
Nanny Shu
Xia Ming
actually
couldn't
didn't
help
realize
the
the
cold sweat
seriousness
trickling
of the
down his
problem.
forehead. This rule
He had
was
long
personally
since heard
written
that
by
Super
Super
Chin
Chin
was famous for
as
his
the
blessed
manager
mouth.
of the Order
And
of
now
the
that he had
Universe, he paid
accidentally
the most
hit the nail
attention
on
to
the head,
rules and
all the
regulations.
hair on Xia
This
Ming's
seemed
body
like a
stood on
dispensable
end.
game.
It wasn't
but the
just
universe
Xia Ming.
mentioned in the rules
Even
were
Wang
all
Ling
real.
couldn't help sweating
In other
a few
words,
drops.
betraying the fan
Super
club
Chin was indeed
would result
accurate,
in serious consequences.
especially when it came to random
Wang
guesses.
Ling knew that the purpose
as long as it
behind
wasn't
this
a
fan club was
utilitarian
in fact
healer,
one of
Super Chin would
Guxuanji's
always hit the nail on
They
the
were
head.
all almighty,
As
so
the
it would
two
be too
sides
obvious
fought
if they made a
fiercely,
move.
number 60 High
However,
School,
he could
which had
cast
been
some
lying in
simple
ambush
curses
for a
of bad
long
luck.
time,
Saw
using
that
these
both sides
curses
were
to
pretty
eliminate
much
those who
exhausted.
had rebellious
Lotus
hearts.
Sun
He could
immediately
do it without
opened her
anyone
sword
knowing.
spirit space
Moreover,
and handed
they
over
didn't
the
even have
spirit
to
sword
take special
everyone had hidden
precautions.
in it.
On the
And
first
so,
night,
while the students from number
60
60 West High
formed
School
an
and
alliance
Purple
with
Garden
4
High
schools
School
were fighting
led
to
by
their
South
heart's
Sea Sky
content.
High and
The
Titan
number 60
High
High School
to occupy the
students charged out of
territory
the
of
grass
Fire
with
Peak.
spirit swords
But
in
it
their
clearly
hands.
wasn't a peaceful night.
Lotus
Lotus
Sun
Sun
helped
helped Zhu
Isn't
Hanyun
this
change
supposed
the
to be a
bandages
body
that had been
technique
covered with
exchange me?
plasters. How can
She
someone
had
bring
made
these
these
plasters
sword
with
in.
the automatic
The captains
pill-making
of both
machine?
schools were dumbfounded.
Medicinal herbs were first
Holding
made
his
into
spirit
elixirs,
sword ghost tooth.
and then the elixirs
Heroes
were
were
smashed
smashed
and mixed with
embarrassingly.
water to make
If I
plasters.
said that we just forged
This is
it,
a
would you
special
believe
bone
me?
healing ointment.
Who the hell would
After
believe
applying
that?
it for
The
6
captains
hours,
of both
your
schools
injury
said
will be
almost in
completely
unison.
healed. Then there's nothing
Lotus
we can
Sun
do.
patiently helped
Hero
Zhu Hanyun
Hanyun change the bandages,
being able to bring
making
it in
the
as a
boys
sign
around
of
them
skill.
envious.
This isn't cheating.
As the future
Also,
successor
I have
of
to remind
Huagua
you of
Water
something.
Curtain Group,
Sir,
Lotus
times
Sun
have
actually
changed.
paid more attention
Then
to her
Hero
image in
Guo
front of
Ghost Tooth,
outsiders,
which was shaped like
Since
a barn.
they had already
The
decided
moment
to
it was
form an
thrown,
alliance, it turned
was
into
only
too
right
right
for them to help
that
each other.
swiftly swept
Zhu
past the two
Hanyun had
captains,
thought that Lotus Sun
snapping
was
the
a
big
lofty
tree
girl,
behind them in half.
but never expected her
Brother,
to be
your
far
sword isn't
gentler
good
than he
either.
had imagined
The
after
two
this
captains
interaction.
laughed at Hero Guo.
What should he do?
Master of
Could he
Gobi
join the
withdrew
fan
Ghost
club
Tooth,
instead?
shook his
He wanted
index
to
finger
join
lightly
Lotus
at the
Sun's
two
fan
captains,
club.
and then
Brother,
pointed
don't
at the
think
big
too much
tree
about
behind
it.
them. Our
This
captain
tree,
treats
which was
everyone
so
the
thick
same.
that it would take 5
At
or
that
6
moment,
people to
Super
wrap their
Chin
arms
came over
around
and
it,
patted Zhu
toppled over.
Hanyun on the shoulder.
It fell on top
When
of
he
the
saw
two
that Zhu
captains' heads
Hanyun's
on the spot.
imagination was running
Both
wild
of them
after
had
Lotus
golden
Sun
protective
changed Zhu
talismans
Hanyun's bandages,
activated at the same
he knew
time.
that this guy might have misunderstood something.
Chapter
As the
11,
school
50.
goddess,
On the
Lotus
big
Sun
screen
was
in the
indeed
command
very
center,
gentle to
the
everyone,
headmasters
and
of
there was
number 8
practically
West
no
City
difference
High
between
School
them.
and Purple Garden
If she
High
had to
School
find
flew
someone
into
more
a rage
engaged
when they
when
saw the number
it would
60 High
probably be
students take
Wang
out
Ling.
their spirit
But
swords to
Super
launch a
Chin felt
surprise
that he could
attack.
understand what was
Chin
going
Chin
on
Xiao.
between Lotus Sun
You're
and
shameless.
Wang Ling. You actually
After
let
all,
your
the two
students
of them
bring
had
their spirit
experienced the
swords in.
assassination attempt
This kind
in
of
the Xiao
behavior
family
of smuggling
compound back
personal
then,
goods.
and when all was
I
said
really
and done,
have
they
never
could be
seen
said
such
to
a
have gone through
shameless
life
person.
and death together.
President
As the
Chi,
saying
I
went,
think
a
number
friend
60
in need
High
is a
should be
friend
eliminated
indeed.
immediately. This isn't in line with the
Only the
rules
person
of the body
involved would
technique
understand
competition
this
at
feeling.
all.
It's
Zhu
unfair.
Hanyun wasn't a fool.
Headmaster
Seeing
Ziyan of
Super
Purple
Chin's
Garden
thoughtful
expression
expression,
also
he
frowned
felt
as she
that this was a
expressed her
man with a story.
dissatisfaction.
Are
The
you
two
also one of
headmasters got classmate Lotus Sun's suitors? President Chi shook his head.
Super Chin
It's
said
really
lightly.
rare for students to
Super Chin
cultivate
said
a sword
lightly,
spirit
but
space
later
at
I
the
realized
foundation
that classmate
establishment
Lotus
stage.
Sun had too many
Since number
pursuers, so
60
I
high
gave
can
up.
avoid the test,
As a person,
it's
you
not
should be
against
more
the
realistic.
Although
Besides,
this is a body
there are
technique
many times when
competition,
liking
in the
someone
end,
is just
it's
a
a
spur of the
survival
moment.
environment.
After
And
I
the
calmed
students
down
need
and
to
thought
adapt
about
to
it
the
carefully,
situation
I
and
realized
act
that
according to the
classmate Lotus
situation.
Sun might not really
As long
be
as they
suitable
use
for me.
magic reasonably and
You're
even
so
collect
realistic.
resources reasonably
The
during
corners
the
of Zhu
competition,
Hanyun's
it
mouth
won't be
twitched.
against the rules.
So,
Classmate
the meaning
Lotus
of President
Sun has
Chi's
someone she
words was
likes?
already very clear.
Have you seen the video from
Act
a while
according
ago?
to the situation.
Super Chin asked.
To put it bluntly,
The video
as long
he
as
was
they could
referring
avoid
to
the
was
test
actually
at the
the
very
one of
beginning,
Xia Ming and
no one
Wang
would
Ling's
say
duel.
anything even if they took
But
out
later,
some
this video
earth-shattering
was
magic
banned from the
treasure during the
internet and couldn't be
competition.
found anymore.
Although it was a body
Video?
technique competition,
video?
in the end, it
It's
was
nothing.
also a battle
It's
for
fine
survival.
if you didn't see it.
People who were
Anyway,
too well
I think
behaved
classmate
wouldn't
Sun
survive
probably
in
has
someone
someone
she
she
likes.
Many
At
of
that
the
moment,
headmasters
Super
present
Chin
also
also
agreed
agreed
with
with
President Chi's words.
He didn't say it directly,
right,
but the
that's
hint
right.
was clear enough.
President Chi is right.
Is that so? I also
Zhu
agree
Hanyun
with
stood
President
up with
Chi.
a slightly
Being able
disappointed
to bring them
expression.
in is a testament
Super
to their
Chin
own
was
ability.
startled. It's not
Aren't
unfair.
you going to duel him?
The corner of
No.
Headmaster
Zhu
Ziyan's
Hanyun
mouth
shook his
twitched at
head.
these words.
I've already
When
joined
all
the
was said
fan
and
club.
done, she
How
and the
could I be rude
headmaster
to
of West City
classmate
High
Wang
School
Ling?
were still a little
Since this
too
is
well
someone
behaved.
classmate Sun likes.
Seeing how much
He
this
must
group
be
of people
outstanding in
agreed
some
with
way.
President Qi,
I've
it was
decided I
obvious
must
that these
protect
people had
classmate
also
Wang
thought of
Ling.
some way to let
At
their
the very
students
least,
bring in
I'll
their
make
own
sure
goods.
he survives this
Otherwise,
competition
why would
and
they be so
stands until the
protective?
end.
Thus, the
Wang
two
Ling,
schools could only admit
that
that
moment,
they were out
Wang
of luck.
Ling suddenly felt.
Fortunately, the
This
students from the
competition
two schools
seemed to
weren't
have been led
completely
astray
wiped
by
out in
Gu
this
Shunshan
round
and
of
his
ambush.
gang.
Of the 20 students from number 8 West City High School and Purple Garden High School,
Chapter 11
had managed to
62.
escape in the
The
end.
night of the first
Number
day
60
could be
High School
considered
didn't
peaceful.
pursue them. All the
It was only the
participating
first
schools
day,
had
so
found
there was
their
no
own
need to kill
allies
him
and were
directly.
competing for
It was
resources
better to
on the
leave
nearby
some face.
mountain peaks.
Moreover, there
After
were
the
only
first
4
day,
people left
there were
from the
only
two schools,
421
and they were already at the end of their
left.
rope.
As Wang
Even if
Ling
they
had
did not make
expected
a move
on the first day of the
be able to
competition,
survive the
all
next
the
7
schools
days.
had chosen to form an alliance
Although they
of
had
4
won
to
this
5
battle,
schools to
the people
occupy
from
9
number
mountain
60 High
peaks.
School didn't feel
As
like
for
they
the
had
remaining
participated
schools
in
that
it
hadn't
at all.
formed an alliance,
The main reason
even
was
if they
that the
managed
two
to
schools
survive
had
the
already
first
used
day,
up some of
they
their
might
physical
naturally
strength
be
in the
eliminated
earlier
if they
fight.
didn't find a
They
team
had
to
chosen the
distribute enough
perfect time to
resources
launch their sneak attack.
This was just the
and
first
their
day,
victory was
and the
practically set
situation
in
wasn't
stone.
truly favorable.
Wang Ling, on the
Number
other
60
hand,
High
had been
and all the
slacking
other
off the whole
participating
time and
schools
didn't have
could be
much of a
eliminated
sense of
at any time.
participation.
After
He
all,
carefully
on the
avoided
last
the
day of the
attacks in
survival
order to
battle,
avoid
the
the
ranking would be
backlash from
based
hitting
on the
this
order
group
of
of death,
students,
and the
the
school that
light-saving
survived to
effect
the
of
end
the
would be
golden
the
light
king.
shield was
Before
ineffective.
that, anything could
Wang
happen.
Ling's backlash
Even
was
if
so
they
strong
chose to
that it was
form
at
an
least
alliance,
100 times
it would
stronger
only
when
be
he was
because
under
of the
control.
current circumstances.
That was to say,
there
if
was
a
no
fifth
such
hit
thing
him,
as an
the
ally in the
backlash would
truest sense.
completely activate
At least,
the golden
that was
protective
what Wang Ling
talisman
had
and
thought
directly
before the
shatter its
Wang Ling
protective
fan
shield
club was set
It
up.
was too difficult
There were
for
now
him.
5
He
schools
couldn't
in number
directly
60
deal a
High's
heavy
camp.
blow,
Currently, they had
adopted
adopted
a
a
defensive
defensive
strategy.
As a
But
result,
defense
he
alone
hadn't
wasn't
taken the
enough.
initiative to
They
attack
still
the
had to
whole
send
time,
people out to
and had
gather
instead been
resources and
constantly
spy on
dodging
information.
attacks. Thus,
But the truth
Lotus
was
Sun
that Wang
suggested
Ling
that
had
each
also
school
done
pick
some
2
extra
people to
support
form a
in the
resource
battle.
collection team of
For
10
example,
people
it
every
looked like
day to
Hero
gather
had cut
resources
down a
and
tree
gather
with ghost
intelligence.
tooths.
But it was
Number
actually
60
Wang
High
Ling
had
who
a
had
natural
knocked it down.
advantage in this
There was
regard.
nothing he could do about
Thanks
it.
to Mysterious
As a
C's
person
3D
who had
water
all the
screen
good
map,
qualities of a
it could be
socialist
said that the
core,
entire
Wang
nine-dragon
Ling had
mountain
always
could be
understood
seen
the
at a
principle
glance.
of turning into
Furthermore,
spring mud
with
to
Nanny
protect the
Shio's
flowers.
perception ability,
There was
the
nothing
water
wrong
screen
with
map
being a
now had
supporting
the ability
character.
to detect
The
living
main thing was
beings,
that Wang
and
Ling's
any
performance
activity
within
couldn't
a
be too
30
outstanding
radius
due
would be
to the
displayed
Wang
on the
family
map.
teachings.
To ensure
We
that
have to
everyone
choose a
wouldn't
place
get
to
lost
set
in
up
the
camp
process
before
of searching
sunset.
for resources,
After beating
Lotus
off the
Sun had
students
also
from the two
used the
schools,
gathered materials
Lotus
to
Sun
create
calmed
temporary
down and
map
analyzed the
talismans.
map again.
When
They had to
necessary,
be
this
particular
talisman
about
could
where
be
to set
used
up
to
camp.
project the map
If
in
they
a
were too
location
high
with
up,
water
they would
for
be
30
easily
seconds.
surrounded.
But
If they
Lotus
chose
Sun
a place
wouldn't be
like
able
a
to
cliff,
draw
they
such
could
a
avoid the
convenient
attacks
tool
of
on her
spirit
own.
insects and
So a
spirit
temporary
beasts.
talisman
But
team
if they
had
were
been set up
surrounded,
in
they
number
really
60
had no
High's
choice
alliance
but to
camp
jump
to be
off the
responsible
cliff.
for drawing
Thus,
talismans.
they had to find a place
And
with
Wang
food,
Ling was a
water,
member of
and a
this team.
relatively abundant
Brother
supply
Wang
of
was too
spirit
dangerous
plants.
outside. As long as
Just
there were
stay here and
spirit
draw the
plants,
talismans.
Lotus Sun could make
In
some
the camp,
simple elixirs
Zhu
to drive
Hanyun
away
looked at
insects
Wang
or
Ling
even spirit
affectionately in
beasts.
front of a
She was
temporarily
from
set up
Huaguo
table.
Water Curtain Group
Wang
and was
Ling,
their future
compared
successor.
with all kinds of
There was
dangerous
no way she
gathering
would
and
do
spying
something that would bring
activities in
shame
the
to her
outside
family
world.
in this
Drawing
national
talismans was
competition.
indeed a much
As
more
long as there
ideal
were
method
enough
for
spirit
him.
plants,
He could
Lotus
contribute
Sun
to the
would have a
team,
lot of room
but
to
he could
shine.
also loiter
But
around
where
in the
to
base
choose
like
was
a
another
nobody,
problem.
which was pretty good.
The reason why Jiulong Mountain was called Jiulong Mountain
But it never
was because
occurred
of
to
its
Wang Ling
topography.
that he hadn't made this
Jiulong
decision on
Mountain
his
was
own,
surrounded by
and that
9
everyone
peaks
had
that were shaped
directly
like a
decided
dragon's
that he would
claw.
stay in the
They
Doubt
faced the
Talisman
huge
team.
dome in the middle,
In addition
which was
to
the
the
main
map
peak
display
display talisman, used to display maps.
There were 10
There were
mountains on
actually
9
many
Dragon
other
Mountain,
types of
and
talismans.
the main peak naturally
For
had the
example,
most resources.
the enhancement talisman
But it was
used to
very
strengthen
likely that a
weapons.
lot of people were
This was a
fighting
spell
over
that
it,
could
and Juan Ling
temporarily
and the others
change
were
the
too far
material
away.
of a weapon.
If they rushed over now, it was very likely that they would already lose the initiative.
You could still use a branch
if
or
they
a
wanted to
bamboo as
take
a
it
weapon.
back, they would have to
After
think
using
about
the
it at
weapon
length.
enhancement charm,
So now,
you could
the number
transform
60
the
high team
temporary
could only
material
choose
of
the
the
Dragon
branch
Claw
into
peak closest to
That
them,
way they would
and
have a
fight for
certain
a
place
place
with
with relatively
power.
abundant resources.
If the strengthening talisman was
9
used on
Dragon
a
Mountain,
spirit sword
Fire
or magic
Peak.
treasure,
After
it would double the
analyzing the map,
lethality of the spirit
Lotus
sword
Sun
or
gave her
magic
suggestion.
treasure. In addition, there was one of the Dragon Claw peaks on 9 Dragon Mountain,
Water Dragon
and had a tropical
invisibility
talismans,
Although it was
Qi-holding
relatively
talismans,
hot,
and
it
other
was abundant
talismans
in
used for
resources,
self-defense,
and most
spying.
importantly,
Of course,
it wasn't
drawing
far from their
talismans
current
wasn't
position.
difficult for him.
Apart from
But
that,
the problem
there was a
was
supply point
the
on the edge of
talisman he
Fire
drew,
Peak.
even when he was
Looking at
trying
the
his
current
best
map,
to control it,
there was already
their
no better
strength would
place
also
than
be
Fire
very
Peak.
different from that
Of course,
ordinary
they couldn't
Foundation
rule out the
establishment
possibility
students.
that a school was already
November
stationed
16th,
there. Sunday.
After some discussion,
On the
they
second
decided
day of
to
the
fight
survival
the Fire
battle,
Peak first.
the number on the
Using
main
the
peak
turtle
of the
breathing
dome
spell
hadn't
to
changed
hurry
since
along
it was
would greatly
fixed at
reduce their
421
speed.
people.
So Lotus Sun
Juan
thought of
Ling
an excellent
predicted
idea.
that for the next 1 or
She
2
used
days,
mysterious
the schools
sea's power
would
to
probably
combine
continue to
everyone's
spy on
spirit
each other
energy,
in secret,
which
and
finally
wouldn't
turned
launch
into a huge turtle
battle,
shell to
much
protect
less
everyone
cause a
inside.
huge number of casualties
This is the
like on
blue
the
sea
first day.
turtle shell technique.
The next day,
Breathing
breathing
inside
inside
the turtle
lots
shell
for
won't
Super
expose
Chen
your
and
aura,
Wang Zhen to
and
go
it's
out
the
as
same effect as the
representatives to
turtle
gather
breathing
resources
spell,
and carry out
Lotus Sun
reconnaissance
explained.
activities.
Although Lotus Sun
Nanny
knew
Xio
this
was in
spell,
charge of
if
leading
it
the
wasn't
team.
for everyone's
We'll
spirit
split
energy,
into 2 groups.
their endurance would
One
be
group
worrisome.
will gather
Now,
resources,
it was like
and the
10
other people driving information, lending their resource gathering to mysterious relatively safe together. They would only move around created a problem. Pay attention to using realized that Wang Ling was really too powerful. It would not be easy for them to be discovered. This was the first time in her life that she had felt such majestic. Is there anyone willing to go with me? And she instantly wanted to sing in her heart. Asked as she looked at the 10 people in front of her. I can't take it anymore. Since Nanishio had decided to take part in the spying operation, another student from South Sea Sky High, the terrain finally opened up a little. This was a bespectacled guy with a watermelon on the domed main peak, who gave Super Chin survivors rigidity. 759 for now. This was the current number of survivors. Super Chin volunteered. In less than 4 hours, it wasn't easy for people had already been eliminated in the national competition. Wang Ling speculated that there would be 2 peaks was the most boring thing for him. The first peak would be on the first and second days when everyone was fighting for territory. In any case, after the situation calmed down in the next few days, on number 60 most of the school teams would adopt although it looked like a draw, it was actually controllable. The second peak would be on the 7th and 8th days of the competition. In order to determine the winner, everyone would have to fight. There basically wouldn't be any risk. When the time came, the officials would definitely step in to control the situation, foundation such as deliberately guiding powerful were like an actual to drive people away from where they had set up directly agreed to. In addition to protecting the students' lives, I have no objection. The teachers in charge of safety were in fact also responsible for guiding the students. That it would be very difficult to gather enough people in the national competition. In the end, using powerful spirit beasts to drive people away was essentially no different from the shrinking circle that had been used in the team was just military training. If there were too many people, they wouldn't be able to take care of everyone. Beast to drive after happily deciding and on that was that the spirit beast had to be strong enough to be the closest mountain to fire along the way. Wang Ling did his best to hide his aura, but the natural aura he exuded. There's a very familiar smell on the nearby jungle. Completely afraid to approach tentatively as he followed. It wasn't just spirit beasts. He could more or less guess Nanishio's true purpose. Rats and ants were anxious to flee when yesterday that number 1 devil subduing coupled with Wang Zhenming has formed an alliance with 4 schools to occupy that place. The 6 of them in number 60 High's team were like walking demon repellent insects again. And as they walked through the jungle, this person is a little flying insects and he's very close to us and could launch a surprise attack at any time. Lotus Sun had been very cautious as she walked, character for fear that she would make too much noise and allied with nearby vicious beasts. However, she never expected that he had always been worried about number 1 devil. Furthermore, they hadn't run into any other opponents on the way. This control spell was directly made the whole process and most importantly, that it almost made people wonder if they had joined a fake survival game. Nanishio had dealt with Gao Tianming in the previous competition. We've been walking for so long. Why haven't we run into a single monkey? This person is crazy. Master of Dopey used his sword to push aside the bushes in front of him. Because no ally was as reliable as a puppet for him to control. But his movements gradually became rough. There's not even a single bird, let alone a monkey. In the team, Chapter 11 was also surprised. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge rich and in every battle. It was impossible for intelligence was one of the most important tasks in this survival battle. Today, she had planned to show off her superb cooking skills in the wild kitchen were different, but it seemed that she was not given this opportunity. It was necessary to combine the overall advantages of each camp to maximize the benefits of spying. It was a strange sight to see that there were no spirit beasts represented by South Sea Sky High. Although his original intention had been to keep a low profile when it came to spying, since he had decided to put on an act, he had to go through with it to perception, and he amplified his spiritual nature. And a message was immediately transmitted to survival ears in the command center. As they approached Miss Peak's territory, who was in trouble, Wang Zhen received the message and understood Wang Ling's predicament. The wild pheasant they had caught on the way here could play a crucial role at a time like this. Now that old mind assimilation Qi and many headmasters were here, Nanishio cast a spell and aimed his eyes at the pheasant's eyes. Fortunately, Audiobook was already prepared. Was puzzled. He took out his phone and sent a shaking window to a new chat. This spell can assimilate minds and control a living being's brainwaves. But it can assimilate a living being's brainwave. Little Silver, in the end, it can share sight, hearing, and smell. Now, this pheasant's brain is completely and all the spirit beasts in the jungle nearby have been scared away. As he pushed up his glasses. We have to think of a way. I see. Buttface, Super Chin nodded. We just need to find a group of people to put on a show. Nanishio had caught the pheasant on the way here. Then leave it to me. It wasn't to eat it. Audiobook nodded and then sent a reminder. Super Chin was still puzzled. When the 2 of you make a move, pheasants are the least likely to be noticed. It wasn't easy for me to assign you to the guard team, and it's not easy for them to detect enemies. High-level creatures are too big, which makes them difficult to capture and control. Little Silver and Loopy Toes had come to 9 Dragon Mountain. So to sum up, pheasants were indeed the most ideal target for assimilation in the current environment. Audiobook had already anticipated that something unexpected might happen, so he had arranged for Little Silver and Loopy Toad to be part of the guard team in advance, which was almost as good as a hawk's and could see very far away. It would naturally be much easier for it to sneak into controlling the pheasant. After receiving the message, one silver and one dog immediately got to work. However, an unexpected crater is currently near Fire Peak. A sharp arrow pierced through the clouds above the peak of Mist Peak and directly pierced through the creatures there. The pheasant had only just climbed up the tree when it was killed by an arrow on the spot, it's very turning into a pile of minced meat. Toad nodded and sighed in its heart. Had no time to react to such a horrifying scene. Spirit Beast had a natural sense of danger, and his assimilation was similar to a human sixth sense. His face was sometimes even more drenched in sweat. Thus, this was the after effect of the assimilation. But under normal circumstances, the domineering aura that he exuded was the assimilation before he knew there was danger. But it actually wasn't that troublesome to deal with, and the pain of the pheasant's death was transmitted to the mouth of the hidden cave, causing him to be unable to withstand it for a moment. His holy beast essence. Their reactions are a bit fast. Will that work? Loopy Toad was doubtful. Super Chin was also horrified at this scene. Naturally attractive. Less than 10 seconds after the pheasant was sent up, an arrow had been shot from a distance and accurately killed the pheasant. At the mention of Little Silver's observed the blood, it was a simple homemade wooden arrowhead with some deadly poison. In order to heal it and transform it, someone the golden talisman would immediately judge Little Master Ling had fed it golden barrier basin of holy beast essence. However, this should not be the power of the foundation shadow on Loopy Toad. One had to know that they were still at least 5 miles away from Mist Peak. If you ate too much, in a situation where they didn't have a magic weapon, it was the same with holy beast essence. It was almost impossible to rely on a homemade never drunk holy beast essence blood across mountains. Little Silver's blood indeed had a natural attraction. In a short while, Little Silver could smell the restless spirit beasts in the jungle. As soon as he said this, for a moment, it was as if the whole jungle had come back to life. Startled, if the terrain advantage was taken into account, it was indeed possible forming a strange phenomenon of a bird tide. Mist Peak was the most just a drop of holy beast essence blood, a formless airflow, but it had actually generated such a violent disturbance, blowing away all living beings that attempted to fly over the mountain in all directions. The scene in front of it still couldn't help feeling a little shaken from a long distance. It recalled taking advantage of the special wind pressure on the terrain and archery skills. Can you feel it? On the contrary, the wind pressure on the mountain top was the least after reaching the top. Start with the king of the spirit beasts, but be careful not to kill them all. What had happened just now had been too sudden, and he hadn't been able to recover them all alive. But he was already doing his best to adjust. Master as extras. Gao Tianming chose Mist Peak, which is easy to defend and hard to attack, and has a natural advantage. Then half a drop of holy beast blood for each king. But the problem is that they can't stay on the mountaintop all the time. They also have to send out supply teams to gather resources. Chapter 1152. We can ambush them. The fatal attraction of the holy beast blood caused a stir in the jungle, noticed something new. And several huge spirit beasts near Super Chin noticed that someone was actually releasing something that looked like a giant ape king with two arms flew in all directions due to the air pressure on the mountaintop. It was already drooling as if it had smelled 1,000-year-old honey to each of them. A second-class giant flaming arm and a long thin tube extended out to spit out a silk thread with dozens of third-class spirit beasts. And he's actually taking advantage of the terrain, using fishing to gather the spirit changes in the plants around us. As long as it could control these spirit beasts, it would be enough to put on an act. Little Silver known that Gao Tian working together could easily deal with these spirit beasts, but he hadn't expected the other party to actually go this far. Python King if he could even use to rush to gather resources, then the people from their camp used the Python King's body, which was tens of meters long. They didn't need to send people down the mountain to look for resources at all. Spare us. Super Chin had thought that the two second-class spirit beasts were completely stupefied. 60 High's defense was already a holy beast, but he had never expected to run into someone who was even worse off than one was AF ** King Green broke out in cold sweat as they also felt despair. It had to be known that they had been cultivating for 1,000 years, but judging from the usual interactions where they could take human form high and number 1 devils later, doing high. Everyone from number 60 high saw birds circling in the jungle in front of them and accumulated a wealth of experience in previous battles. The numerous spirit was also led by the second-class Ape King and Python King ran around Wang Ling. They weren't in the mood to fight and were purely going through the motions. Gritted his teeth a little unwillingly. This group of spirit beasts just like number 60 high and number 59 high were enemies. He had smelled Little Silver's one devil blood high also had, and now he had run into this group of spirit beasts. This was already Nanishio's third confrontation with Gao Tianming. They were suddenly running around one after another. The first two had instantly understood the situation in front of him. Nanishio felt very obvious that Little Silver and Loopy Toad had forced this group of spirit beasts to act as extras. I'm afraid they've already discovered us. Wang Ling sighed in his heart how hard it was for them to act as extras. Puppets, which they were running around randomly to gather resources, could also monitor their surroundings. If they all rushed over in a swarm, Nanishio wasn't sure whether or not the area would be judged to be at risk of a beast tide. But based on that snip just now, their position had definitely been time to time. But the average probability of it happening was about once every 3 months. I'm sure they did. It was extremely dangerous to travel such a long tide, and the command center would definitely send people to investigate the cause of the beast tide. How about this? If that was the case, then there was no need for it at all. You guys think of a way to cut their lines. Under Little Silver's we'll deal with as many as we can. These spirit beasts moved in an orderly manner and didn't raise any suspicions in the command center. The other three were horrified. Wang Zhen
The number of
smiled
spirit
helplessly.
beasts in the surroundings
Don't worry, don't
gradually
look at me like
increased,
this.
and the
I grew
originally
up with them,
boring
and their
jungle
very
exploration
sturdy.
finally seemed a little more interesting. In fact, it didn't matter if there weren't any spirit beasts around
Chapter
them.
1164.
They survived by eating
In
spirit
chapters
fruits and
802
berries
and
in the forest.
803,
But in
Wang
that
Zhen's
situation
nightmares
just
after
now,
he was injured
there hadn't
brought
been
him back
any
to his
spirit
miserable
beasts around him
childhood.
at all.
So
As
it
a
seemed
man
a
who
little
had been
fake.
beaten since he was
After
a child,
another half
from
an
the
hour
very
or
beginning
so,
when he was
everyone
beaten by
from
his
number
wife
60
and his
high
wife,
successfully
to the
reached
tools he
Fire
chose
Peak.
to use to beat
To their
himself
pleasant
up,
surprise, there
Wang
were
Zhen's
no signs of
experiences
a camp
could only
yet.
be described
In
as
other words,
legendary.
number 60
Because of
high
his
was the
special
first to
constitution
arrive.
of being
Were
able to
actually the
withstand
first?
beatings,
Super
and
Chin
awakening
felt a
after
little
being
incredulous.
Wang
The
Zhen's
Eight
body
King
had
and
been
Python
tortured by
King, who
all
were
kinds
running
of
through the
tools.
jungle, felt
A
bitter
god-beating
inside.
whip as thick as a
Under
cola
little
bottle,
silver and
a
Loopy
meteor
Toad's
hammer
coercion.
covered in
Apart from
36,000
agreeing to help
spikes,
put on a show,
skull-crushing
they had
stone
also
forged
taken
from
on the
King
job
Iron.
of interfering
Wang
with the
Zhen had
competition.
survived the
They
torture
each
of these
sent out a
tools.
lot of little
His
apes and
miserable
pythons from their
childhood and the
caves to
pressure of
interfere
life
with the
hadn't
other team's
completely
planning to
crushed him,
station at
and he
Fire
later
Peak.
realized the
Thus,
truth. When the people
he
from
might be
number
a
60
natural
high
warrior
school
and should
arrived,
charge at the
Fire
very
Peak
front
was
as a
very
meat
clean.
shield.
On
Thus,
the other
when
side,
Wang
with the
Zhen
cooperation
decided
of
to
the
use his
command
body
center,
to attract
General
the enemy's
led the
attention,
mahjong players
the people
into the
behind
area
him
where
looked at
human
his back
devils
and
felt
felt
that he was
unprecedentedly
unprecedentedly
active.
handsome. There were no
This is for
students
you.
in this area.
Wang Zhen
They
took
had all
off
been
his
driven away
life-saving
by the
golden
instructors
talisman
and
and
gave
gave
it to
Nanny
Nanishio. Human devil is
For
here.
me.
The old
Nanishio
devil
couldn't
stared at
believe
the
it.
traces of withered
Logically
spirit
speaking,
plants
if
on the
Wang
ground.
Zhen wanted to give
Only
it to someone,
Xia Lixing
it
had
should
the
be Super
terrifying
Chin.
ability to
Super
wantonly
Chin
snatch
was
away
for
number
life.
60 high.
As they moved forward,
Logically
they
speaking,
felt the
he
power
shouldn't
of
give it
death
to
and
an
withering
outsider
that
human
like him.
devil brought with him.
Even if they were in an
General
alliance,
gazed at
it
the
didn't make
footprints on
sense
the
to give
ground,
him such an
each of which
important
carried a
life-saving
deathly
golden
stillness.
talisman.
This
If
was
you
where
give it to
human
me,
devil
what
had
will you
walked.
do?
If
It's
you
too
walked on these
dangerous.
footprints again,
Nanishio
the cells
declined.
in your body would
It's fine, they
instantly
can't
wither
hurt
and
me.
die, as if
Wang
they had been
Zhen
exposed
smiled
to radiation.
confidently.
I'm
Be
giving it to you
stronger.
because I trust
The
you.
old devil
If
stared
something
at the
really goes
footprints on the
wrong,
ground
don't worry about
and
me.
couldn't help
Just
looking
think of a
worried
way
under
to
his
evacuate
mask.
with Super Chen
How
and
is
the
it compared
four-eyed
to your
man.
previous fight?
Nanishio was
General
touched by
Bias.
this feeling of being
It's very
trusted.
tricky.
He
The
no
old
longer
devil
hesitated
hesitated
slightly
and
directly
said
reached
bluntly,
out to take the
when we
golden
fought back
talisman.
then, it was
Since
only
he
the
had taken
places
it, he
had a
touched that would wither and
responsibility
grow
and a
old.
mission.
Now, this
Nanishio was
widespread
the
decay just
responsible
proves
and
that Xia
reliable
Lixing's
person.
holy demon
Wang Zhen
suppressing
had long
strength is
since
gradually
noticed
reaching
this.
great success.
As someone from the
And is
domain
close
of
to
the gods,
perfection.
it was impossible
Suddenly,
for him
the
to
old
not have
devil's
the ability
expression
to peer
turned
into a
increasingly
person's heart.
frightened. Strictly
Not
speaking,
good.
this was also
What did you
one
think
of
of
Wang Zhen's special
the holy
talents.
demon suppressing
Because he had
strength
grown
can
up
help absorb
experiencing
the
all
souls
kinds
of all
of
living
violence and
things and
malice,
devour their
Wang
cells.
Zhen was
There are
especially
natural
sensitive to
phenomena
malice
on 9
and could
Dragon
sense the
Mountain every
labels in the
day,
depths
such
of
as
a
the
person's
rainbow
heart.
mist.
For example, Wang Zhen had
If this
seen
person
labels
devours
like
all
upright,
living things on 9
courageous,
Dragon Mountain,
witty,
and then uses the
reliable
natural phenomena on
Nanishio.
9 Dragon Mountain
For example,
to wait for
the
all
labels
living
Wang
things to
Zhen
recover
saw for
before
Luqing
finally
were
devouring
violent,
them.
Sundra,
In this way it'll
kind,
go on and on.
charming. When
For
the old
example,
devil said
Gu
this,
Xuanji had very
everyone
few
present
labels.
shuddered a little.
Scheming,
If
keeper
this
of
was
order,
really the case,
because of
then
Gu
this would be
Xuanji's
the legendary
identity
identity
and
and
the
the
fact
fact
that
that Wang Zhen's strength devouring all living
by
things that
heavenly
he had
down.
already
Wang Ling
devoured.
couldn't clearly
General
see
Bai
all of
really
Gu
hadn't
Xuanji's
thought of this
tags.
before. We have to get rid of human devil Xia Lixing
Under
as
normal
soon as
circumstances,
he could
General
see at
Bai
least
was
4
now well
labels
aware
in
of
the
the
depths of other
seriousness of
people's
the
hearts.
situation.
Sometimes
Although
there
this
would be a
area had
dozen or
already
even
been
20
sealed
of them.
off, human devil
Of course,
Xia
there were
Lixing
also
had
people
already
who could
become
not
their
feel
top
the
priority.
label. For
What was
example,
worse was
Wang
that they
Ling
hadn't
Wang
found
Zhen
any
remembered that when
traces
he
of
had
human
checked the
devil
tags,
after coming
Wang
here.
Ling's tag
This
had
was
been
an
like this.
absolutely cunning
After
enemy.
discussing their
If they
strategy
didn't get
with
rid of him,
Nanishio,
they were
Wang
afraid
Zhen
that
charged
things would
forward
change.
without a care for
General
his own
Bai
safety.
contacted the command
Although
center
he was sure
again.
that Gao
Calling the
Tianming, who
command
was at
center.
the Foundation
We haven't
establishment
found any
stage,
trace
wouldn't
of
be able
human
to harm
devil
his
Xia
body.
Lixing.
There was no way he would
Requesting a
use
new
his body to
location.
block the attack in
The
public.
truth was that at
That
that
would be
moment,
too obvious.
a black shadow was
So while
quietly
Wang Zhen
following
had gone
Wang
there
Ling.
with the intention of
After
using
human
his body
devil's
to
revival,
taunt Gao
he
Tianming,
urgently needed
he
a
still
young
wanted
and
to use his
vigorous
body to
reflexes
replenish
to
himself
avoid the attack.
And the people
How
Xia
fast
Lixing
could
was
a
targeting
foundation
were none other
than the 10 people from number 60 high school. He would be able to react in time. To be precise, his main target was Wang Ling. Even if he was hit, for some reason, Xia Lixing felt that the aura of this dead fish when he had been hit by the exceptionally delicious. He hadn't even surpassed that of his peers. After advancing another 4 li, all of the same age here, was less than there was still a fundamental difference between their bodies. Such an obvious young man who had developed morally, intellectually, physically, on the mountain aesthetically. The reason why Wang Ling's flesh was so good was very simple. Wang Jin's dynamic vision was Wang Ling slept early and got up foundation established, didn't drink beverages, and never stayed up late. And when the arrows came at him, he felt as if they were moving at a speed that was 1,000 times slower than before. Human devil Jin casually dodged to the side and perfectly avoided them. The highest posture was a little like everything wasn't to devour. During his days on Earth, with everything. Wang Jin had often thought about his battles with Wang Ling, cultivated and had also subconsciously imitated Wang Ling, turn himself into a shadow and lurk in the shadows of all living things. He was imitating them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Wang Ling's essence. This kind of covert action was usually hard to detect. Tianming had already noticed what was going on down below. The case. Captain Truth was that Wang Ling had noticed Xia Lixing the moment he set his sights on number 60 expressionlessly casually as he stepped forward. It was just that he didn't know that the person following him was the legendary human devil Xia Gao Tianming's virus. After all, Wang Ling hadn't been born when Xia Lixing was now under trouble in the world back then. As far as Gao Tianming was concerned, and the present was different. These people were nothing more than tools under his command. A baby who was invincible from birth would appear in the mountain with a profound expression in his eyes, of this family and then crazy enough to prepare for a second child. Gao Tianming took out a photo from his pocket, just Wang Ling, and after comparing it with a puppet with a telescopic function, he confirmed that the person at the foot of the mountain had also noticed himself. But seeing someone had found him a while ago and given him a photo. They weren't in a hurry to make a move. The people in the photo were all from number 60 high school. They communicated with each other in a mental space constructed from their thoughts. I sense malice behind me. Should we think of a way to get rid of it? Gao Tianming didn't know where these people came from. He was used to being beaten up by his parents since he was young, so he was especially sensitive to injure these targets as much as possible in this competition, and he quickly thought of a countermeasure. Severely injuring these big shots was easier said than done, which relied on Gao Tianming's original strength. It was naturally difficult. Were definitely ineffective. Thus, that person gave Gao Tianming in conjunction with a mental attack to inflict serious damage to its soul. Couldn't believe his eyes. But Ling Jinren hasn't made a move yet. Permanently increase your strength for a short period of time. In any case, this person isn't much of a threat to him. He's just an annoying mosquito. This isn't an ordinary dumpling. Shook her head slightly. It was almost destroyed, but I managed to recover quite a bit of it from the remains. In the upper world of the domain of the gods, a foothold in the world. This kind of spell was child's play. Before Gao Tianming, nowadays cultivators who used the devouring spell to strengthen themselves mostly had unstable foundations. But while the person's words strong on the outside, but weak on the inside, and couldn't withstand a single blow. Gao Tianming felt like he couldn't control his hands as he definitely has a deeper reason for not making a move. At that moment, why don't we leave him alone and observe him for now? The person he was facing wasn't an ordinary foundation establishment cult opinion in the mental chat space. Gao Tianming had been concealing his strength during the test. Is miraculously he had obtained the power of shadow demonic spell, and under the guidance of the mysterious person who had given him this devil off the map without to control his shadow. As long as he put it away, he could perfectly suppress his strength. Don't worry, and now it was time to release his heavenly Dao list and discovered that Xia had already on the heavenly Dao wanted list. But in the end, he still wanted to find an opponent to test it out on. By the heavenly Dao. In any case, he would only severely injure the other party if he was left alone. This was what Gao Tianming thought in his heart. Then he would release his shadow. He was the sudden danger made the universe and knew the names of every evil person. Even though Xia Lixing's criminal index was very high in this world, he wasn't even in the top 100 on the Heavenly Law Wanted list. Chapter 1165. Thus, when Gu Xuanji found out the human demon Xia Lixing's wanted index, Wang Zhen boasted that there weren't many attacks that could truly make him tremble. He was just an ant not to mention that this was a competition between foundation establishment and the match before him. Wang Zhen hadn't been that Xia Lixing also felt very confused, and never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that a foundation establishment high school student he felt like he had already been discovered. But these people in front of him were just foundation from a high school cultivator should have. Xia Lixing really didn't charging at him. He had already been discovered. This was a puppet. They were just a bunch of foundation establishment. It was very large and 2 meters tall. How could they possibly discover him? Like a roly-poly had to be an illusion. As it charged, he was extremely confident in the holy devil's suppressing strength, and the steel wings, logically speaking, through the air like a cat scratching would be discovered in such a well-hidden environment. Had their own exclusive puppet, Xia Lixing was a little doubtful about his actions. Which cut he didn't make a move right away, but planned to observe the smile of a rag doll that could be seen in horror movies. Became very strange. It opened its steel teeth and swallowed Wang Zhen. 6 people in number 60 high wasn't afraid of this level of attack. But as one of the most outstanding meat shield warriors in the domain was already being watched, Wang Zhen directly chose to meet force. As evening approached, number 60 high occupied a pretty good position on which had been strengthened by this mysterious power. Super Chen and Xia Ming were in charge of cutting down trees and gathering wood to set up a temporary camp. A black shadow suddenly descended, and Wang Zhen felt a powerful attractive force. In the next second, darkness descended, and Fang when he came back to his gathering spirit, the scene in front of him was no longer hunting was not a difficult task for them. It was a wasteland filled with shadows. Given that little silver, he couldn't hear a single sound. The go-ahead, only a disgusting feeling lingering around his body. Second-class ape, the smell of blood were also in charge of helping hunt in the jungle, making him feel like he was tied up and sunk into a pool of blood. Thus, was he number 60 high's food that night was exceptionally rich. No. In addition to the spirit things were far berries they had gathered on Nine Dragon Mountain, he was convinced that the place he was in was a different fourth-class flame existence similar which was enough for the 10 of them to eat. It was simply impossible for a building foundation stage cultivator to possess this kind of power. Furthermore, this world was really pheasants would already be amazing. A cultivator's small world they could actually constructed by the nomological laws of heavenly Tao. It wasn't that hard. Before Wang Zhen's power hadn't even taken a few steps. He had his own sky already lying on the side. In a small world, there could be mountains and rivers, forests and deserts. I went up and stabbed him. To use a more appropriate analogy, Wang Zhen felt that a
Li
true
Yue,
small world was
on the
like
other
a player's
side,
manner
the camp
system
had
in a
already
game.
been set up.
After the
Wang
nomological
Ling actually
construction
hadn't
was
helped much.
complete,
You
since
could
Super
freely
Chin and
decorate
Hero
your
Guo
own
had been
manor,
too
plant
enthusiastic
flowers and raise
after
animals.
cutting down the trees.
However, this
They had
alternate
used their
world in
spirit
front of
swords
him
to
was
cut the trunks into
unimaginably
long
dark.
strips.
All
And
of
then
a sudden,
carefully
Wang
shaved
Zhen
off the
recalled
rough
something
bark.
that Wang Ling
The
had
bark was
mentioned
very
before,
dry and could also
shadow
be used
image
for living.
space. They then gathered a lot of banana leaves to cover the
Could
top
this
of
be
the
the
tents.
shadow image space
Just like
that had been
two
formed under
temporary
the
tents were
influence
set
of
up,
Ling Jinren's
one
little
for
sister?
boys and one for girls.
He knew that Wang Ling
This
had
really is
expended
a
a lot of
real-life
energy
version
to
of
deal with the
Minecraft.
frozen dumplings
Exciting.
that had been on the run recently.
Super Chin's forehead
Wang
was
Zhen
covered
had
in
thought
sweat,
that he had
but
already
it was
solved
hard
the
to
problem,
hide his excitement.
but he hadn't expected
After
to
the
run
two
into
tents
it
were
again
set up,
here.
everyone
At that
looked
moment,
at the huge
Wang Zhen
numbers
was sure
projected
that he had
above the
already
dome
been
mountain
swallowed
peak.
into the shadow image
Survivors
space,
remaining,
and the way to break free was to find the inner demon
Another
in the
70
shadow
people
image
had been
space,
eliminated.
defeat it, and
Tonight,
disintegrate
2
it
people
from
will
the
patrol
inside.
the sentry post.
Just as he was about to make a move,
every hour,
he suddenly felt
after
a stabbing
giving
and pain in his
instructions,
body.
Lotus Sun
His
started
entire
to use
body
some
was
of the
turning
spirit
into
plants
wood. Wang Zhen
he had become a
gathered to
wooden
make
puppet.
medicine.
Then,
Don't you need
threads
tools?
as fine as
Wang
gossamer
Zhen
threads
asked.
fell from the
Of
sky
course.
and connected to his
After
body
saying
one
that,
after
the
another.
Lotus Sun opened
Wang Zhen
mysteriously
realized that he had already lost
and
all
took out a
control of his
luxurious
body
multifunctional
and had completely
automatic
turned into a
pill-making machine.
marionette. This was a
Spurred on
machine
by this
designed purely
mysterious
for
force,
dummies. Wang
he
Zhen
just
walked
needed to
step
pour
by step
spirit
toward
plants
a
and
palace.
herbs into the machine,
This was the
and
only
it would
palace in the
automatically
entire
filter
shadow
them and then
image
quickly
space.
turn them into
Wang
pills
Zhen was
according to your
surprised to
needs.
find that there
It
were
was
other
much more
people here who had
convenient than
become
using an
puppets like
alchemy
him.
furnace.
Many of them were
Furthermore,
students
this
participating in the competition was exclusive to
all of their
bodies were
group.
suspended by threads,
Is that even possible?
and their bodies moved according
Everyone
to
was
the will of this
stupefied.
world. The headmasters
led
in the
Wang
command
Zhen
center
to a
were
resource
also
area.
collectively astonished.
His completely
Didn't you
uncontrollable
say that
body
being able
picked
to
up the
bring in
bricks
something
piled
means
on
you
the
have the
ground,
ability,
and then
it
move
doesn't
toward a
count
wall
as
that had
cheating?
yet to be completed?
Lotus Sun smiled
A puppet
shyly.
in front of Wang Zhen
In fact, there was a compressed luxury
brick in
villa
its hand
capsule
shattered
in her
when it
sword
hit the
spirit
ground.
space.
Don't
She just
defy my
needed to
will.
throw it on the
Gao
ground, and a
Qinming's
villa
fate
would be
voice
built
came
in
from
an
the
instant.
space.
But on
An
second
invisible
thought,
whip
she
lashed
felt that
out
her
at the puppet
operation
that
had
had
made
made
a
a
little
mistake,
overboard
and
and
a layer
destroyed
of
the game's
sawdust
balance.
and a strong
So in
smell
the
of
end,
blood
she didn't
flew out
take
of
it
the
out.
puppet.
But
In
in
that
essence,
instant,
as long as
Wang
Wang
Zhen
Ling was
suddenly
around,
understood.
number 60 High
This
School,
palace was the
this
sweatshop
balance
of
would
all the
always be
people who
broken.
had been
forcibly turned into puppets. Is this the power of Shadow
Chapter
Dao?
1154.
Wang Zhen was amazed.
At night,
the
Shadow
temperature
Image,
on 9
Shadow
Dragon
Image
Mountain
World,
plummeted.
and the unique power of
Standing
each
at the
Shadow
top
Image
of Fire
World,
Peak and looking
Wang
into
Zhen
the
knew that
distance,
he was
Wang
probably
Ling saw
trapped.
that a lot of
Now,
places
he
were
needed
actually
to think of
frozen
a way
over
to
and
let
even
people
snowing.
know where on Earth
It was
he
a
was
completely
trapped.
different world from
According
Fire
to the
Peak.
plan he had originally
Fire Peak was
discussed with
surrounded by
Wang
a
Zhen,
tropical
Nanisha
climate.
was going to
It
take
was
Super
extremely
Chin to
hot
cut
during
off
the
the
day,
threads
but
of
just
the
right
kite
at night.
puppets.
To
So
prevent
in theory,
Gao
Fire
Tianming from
Peak was
fishing
an
for
ideal
resources
place
to set up camp.
But halfway
But
there,
the people from number
Nanisha's
60 High
expression
School
suddenly
never
turned
expected that
serious.
after they set up camp
Something's
here for
not
so
right.
long, no one
Classmate
would come
Wang
to fight
Zhen's
them
aura
for
has
territory.
suddenly disappeared.
The plummeting
This
temperature in the
situation
distance
made
blended
Nanisha's
with the
hair
warm
stand
air
on
here,
end.
and the
There were
temperature
only
difference
3
instantly
possibilities
created
for
a
a
large
person's
white
aura to
mist
suddenly
around 9
disappear
Dragon
from the
Mountain.
map.
It was like a song of
he
ice
was
and
deliberately
fire.
hiding his
It was
aura.
more dangerous to act at night than during the day.
This was
but the
unlikely
truth was
to
that
happen,
as long as
because
one was
according
good
to
at
the
using
original
the white
plan,
mist as
Wang
cover,
Zhen was going
the
to
success
act as
rate
a
of
meat
a sneak
shield to
attack
talk
would
greatly
greatly
party,
increase,
and he would love
so
nothing
Wang Ling
more
was
than for
wondering
his
if
aura to
someone
be
was going to
captured
take
by the other
advantage of
party.
this opportunity to
He had
launch a
fallen
night
into a
attack on them.
mysterious space.
But whether
It
or
could
not
be a
there
free
was a
spell,
night attack,
or it could be a small
Wang Ling
world or
didn't
something
care at
like
all
that.
about the attack
But the
itself.
problem was,
to him,
how
this
could an
competition
almighty
was
who
just
could
a game
open
to
a
pass
small
the time.
world appear in a
He didn't
foundation
take it
establishment
seriously,
competition?
nor did he intend
The
to
last
use
and
his
third
spiritual
possibility
senses to
was the
spy
one
on the enemy.
Nanisha didn't want to
He would
believe
just
the
let
most.
nature take its
Death.
course.
At
On the
that
other
moment,
side, in
there
number
was a
60 High's
violent
camp,
whistling sound
Lu
as
Qingyi
Wang
felt
Ling
a little
felt something
uneasy.
heavy fall on the
At the
back of his
beginning,
head,
she had sensed that
followed by
Wang
the
Zhen's
crisp
aura
sound of a
seemed to have
collision.
disappeared from the entire
Someone
9
was
Dragon
sneaking up
Mountain
on
map.
him.
But
But
that
Wang
didn't
Ling
rule
had
out the
already sensed this
possibility that
person's
Wang Zhen
presence
had
earlier
hidden
on.
his aura for the
Wang
sake
Ling
of
had
carrying
thought
out
that
the
he
mission.
might be able to
This
trigger the
idiot
golden
could he even
talisman's
make a
life-saving
mistake and
foundation establishment competition, and wait for the teachers to rescue him before leaving the competition as soon as possible. When she had fled to Earth to escape marriage, because she had even hoped countless times that this hateful guy would die. The fatal effect Heavenly Tao had punished her, and the person who had attacked Wang Ling was none other than Zhu Hanyun, and they were trapped on Earth, the team leader of living the lives of others. This was she realized that Wang Jin actually wasn't as annoying as she had thought. Judging from the strength of the swing, Wang Ling's should have been enough to trigger the Golden Talisman's fatal judgment without the other party noticing. What had just happened was indeed the aura of Shadow Head without any movement. He had already wiped out all those frozen dumplings, but there were still remnants instantly on guard. Wang Ling frowned slightly. There was some reason to believe that the disappearance of Wang Jin's aura had something to do with this Shadow Dao aura. Wang Ling with the aura just now. Let's go take a look. Not only had Wang Ling not been injured in his heart, Zhu Hanyun's own hand he had always been someone who was afraid of trouble. In a moment of desperation, Zhu Hanyun used the sound transmission spell. It was a brother's duty to clean up his little sister's which had been preparing to besiege number 60 high school, immediately withdrew from the front line.
Chapter 1166.
The truth was that
12
kite
puppets
responsible
several
for collecting resources
already joined hands
according
to
to his will,
and annihilate
as he collected
resources.
He could use the kite puppets to look into the distance and enjoy the beautiful scenery at the foot of Mist Peak.
order to retreat.
This feeling of
not long
looking
after
down
they
on
went
all
up.
the mountains made
Titan
him
High
feel
School,
for the first
South
time
Sea Sky
the
High
pleasure of
School,
standing at a
Northern
high
Fist
place
High
and
School,
obtaining infinite
and West
power.
Leg Tyrant High
The
School
feeling of having
temporary
temporary cultivation
school alliance to
For
inquire
Gao
about the
Tianming,
situation.
Shadow Dao was
What
like a piece of
happened?
chocolate that his
Senior
body had
brother
been
is
craving
injured.
for sugar for a long
Titan
time.
High's junior
It gave him a
sister
strong
Yin
sense of
helped
satisfaction
both
down
mentally
from
and
Nine
physically.
Dragon Mountain. Shadow
How
Dao
did it
Shadow
happen?
Image and the
South
unique
Sea
Shadow
Sky
Image
High
ability
immediately
that had
sent
been
a medical
activated.
student over
Gao
to check on
Tianming had no
Zhu
idea
Hanyan's
that there was such a magical
right
power
arm
in
fractured
this world.
bone.
He didn't know
how
how he could lose
the
the competition with this special ability.
Otherwise, there might be
He could use
repercussions.
Shadow Image to bring people
Fractured
into the
bone.
Shadow Image space,
Nanishio,
and
the
then
squadron
forcibly
leader of
transform them
South
into
Sea
his
Sky,
puppets who
frowned
would work
deeply.
in the space.
Zhu Hanyan's
In the
body
long
was
run,
extremely
his Shadow
dense.
Image space
For
could
such a
expand
physique
without
to
limit
show signs
and
of
thus
bone
accommodate
fractures.
more puppets.
It was most likely
and
due
these
to some
people
kind
who
of
had been
violent
turned
impact.
into puppets would
But the
become
problem was
stumbling
that
blocks
from
on
the
his
foot of
road
the
to
mountain,
success.
they had been keeping a
For
close
Gao
eye on what was
Tianming,
going on up
these
there,
puppets were
but
like
there hadn't
rewards
been
from
any
a claw
movement at
fishing
all up
machine in
there.
the mall.
So the
Not
question
only
was,
would they
where
become
had the injury
employees
on
in his
Zhu
puppet
Hanyan's arm
factory,
come from?
but they would
At
also
that
become
moment,
unique
Zhu
collectibles.
Hanyan's face was red
Captain,
with shame.
there seems to
and
be
he
someone
naturally
at the
didn't
foot
want
of
to
the
say
mountain.
more about what had
At
just
that
happened.
moment, a voice
Even if he
sounded
did,
in Gao
he didn't
Tianming's
intend
ear.
to tell the truth.
The speaker was the
He had
deputy
picked up in
captain
order
of
to sneak
number
up
one
on someone
devil
else
subduing high
and had
school,
even smashed the back of the head,
a
which
man
was
with
a naturally
naturally
fragile
curly
part.
blonde hair.
In the end,
Xiaming
not only
had
had
also
also
become
become
Gao Tianming's
injured,
puppet,
he had even
but Gao
suffered a
Tianming
fracture.
still held
What
back
an
when it came to
extraordinary
his
shame and
classmates.
humiliation.
He didn't include them
The
in
other
his puppet
party is very
factory.
dangerous.
After the
Helpless,
competition was
Zhu
over,
Hanyun
Gao
could
Tianming
only
would
exaggerate
release
the
all the
highlight numbers
students
from
from
number
number
one
one
devil
devil
subduing high
I
school.
wanted to launch a
It was
sneak
too
attack,
dangerous
but the
to
other
let them
party
act
saw
according
through
to
it.
his own thoughts.
The other party was
It would
already
be better to
prepared
turn them
and
into
used a
his
very
puppets and
strange
let him
defensive
control
spell
them.
to cause my
That
strength
way
to
he would
rebound,
be able to win
and
the
then I became
competition
like this.
smoothly. The
Because
other
of the
party was
lush vegetation
prepared.
around Nine
Hearing
Dragon
this,
Mountain,
Nanny Tian
Gao
frowned deeply.
Tianming was worried that
It
there
seemed
might
that
be a
number
blind
60
spot
High's
that he
team
couldn't
also
cover.
had a
So he
perception
had sent
type
a
player.
professional chess
Not
piece
only
like
had he
Xiaming
predicted
to
the
hide
night
at the foot
attack
of the
in
mountain
advance
as a human
but he
guard.
had also made
Once he
preparations in
discovered the
advance.
enemy, he could
If
quickly
it really
use the
was
kite
as Zhu
puppet's
Hanyun
threads
said,
to fish them
that the
back
other
to the
party
top
could
of the mountain to
set
report
up a
the
defensive
situation.
spell in advance
Thus,
to
Gao
counteract Zhu
Tianming
Hanyun's
was very
attack.
surprised when he heard
Nanishio could only
Xiaming's
think
report.
of the reverse armor
He had
spell.
already noticed that
But
the
given
coward
Zhu
Nanishio
Hanyun's
had run away with the
even if he
scouts,
had been hit by
then
the
who
reverse
else would
armor
come?
spell, he
Titan
might
High's
not have
Zhu
suffered a
Hanyun,
fracture.
or number 60
Unless he
High's
had
cultivated
cultivated
this reverse
Gao
armor spell
Tianming
to an
imagined
extremely
his
high
opponents
level,
in his mind,
which was at least level 7 or level 8. They were
Judging
all
from the
foundation
first round of the
establishment
knockout
students.
round, he felt that the strength of these two people was
Nanishio
close
found
to
it
his own.
inconceivable that
If it was
someone
Zhu
could
Hanyun,
cultivate
he
the
could take
reverse
advantage
armor
of the
art,
situation
an
to subdue
unorthodox
him and turn
magic
him into
spell
a
that
puppet,
wasn't part of his
using
main
him as a
curriculum
meat tank
to such a high
If
level.
it was Lotus Sun,
He never thought
Gao
that the
Tianming
plan to
felt that if
encircle
it
and
really was
annihilate
Lotus
number
Sun,
60
he would
High
turn
would
her
actually
into his
fail in
puppet.
the first round.
Gao Tianming
But
still
Fire
had
Peak
plans
was
to
to
become
become
the
the
son-in-law of
stronghold,
Huaguo Water
and the
Curtain
four
Group.
great high schools
And the
had to
reason
work
why he
together
was
to
working
take
so
down
hard
this
was
bone.
that one day he
Don't
could
send
rival
anyone
Lotus
up there
Sunday.
for the time being.
Sometimes
It's
a
best
person's
if we
birth
use some tricks
determined
to force them down the mountain.
Gao Tianming had
Set
to
a
admit
fire.
that he was too late
Someone
to start.
suggested,
But if he worked
set a
harder,
mountain
he
on
might
fire
be able to
and you'll
catch
die
up.
in prison.
In Gao Tianming's
Of course, we
eyes,
can't set
the
a mountain
powerful
fire so
abilities he had
casually,
obtained
but
were the
Nine
best
Dragon
proof of
Mountain's
his hard
terrain
work.
is special.
However,
The rainbow
when he
mist in the
dispatched
morning
kite
can
puppets
repair
to
the
observe the
vegetation
person
and
at the foot of the
extinguish the
mountain,
fire,
Gao
so it
Tianming's
shouldn't be a big
expression
problem.
abruptly changed.
But the main reason we're
guessed wrong.
fighting for Fire
This
Peak
person
with
wasn't
number 60
Zhu
High
Hanyun
or
or
Lotus
Lotus
Sunday.
Sunday.
It was
takes
number
time
60
for the rainbow
High,
mist to
someone he
repair the
couldn't think of no
vegetation. matter what.
If we set a
This
fire
person
to
is
seize the territory,
Gao Tianming
it'll
tried
be
his
meaningless
best
to if we
recall this
burn all the
expressionless
spirit
young
plants
man
here.
with a pair of dead
We have
fish
to think
eyes
of
who had
another
climbed
way,
Mist Peak
said
from the foot of the
Nanishio.
mountain.
Elsewhere,
The wind
at
pressure
number on
60
Misty
High's
High's blew
camp
his
on the
loose
mountaintop.
school uniform up
Gu
and down,
Shunji had long
causing it
since
to
noticed
what was going on at the foot of the mountain.
The teenager moved with ease as he faced the enormous level of fog and advanced against him.
Mist
40
peak could be divided into 4 stages from the foot of the mountain
used a branch to draw a map of the situation at the stable stage,
during which the wind pressure was
moderate
high, similar to that of a typhoon.
watching number 60
The second stage was the transition stage, during which the wind pressure was more violent than that of a typhoon.
For the
Cultivators who needed to reach the top
out.
would use the absorption ability of spirit
countless
energy to firmly anchor their feet to the ground and advance
The other
step
party
by step.
used the spirit
If there was
summoning spell.
insufficient spirit
Super
energy
Chin
in this
immediately
stage,
identified
it was very
the
likely
origin
that
of
they
this
would be
spell.
overturned halfway
Because this
up
was
the
the first
thing they had learned in Teacher
was
Pan's
known
Tao
as the
Talisman's
hellish
class
windstorm.
in the first semester.
At its peak,
the
was
wind
also
pressure
in
could
that
weigh
Tao
more than a
Talisman's
dozen
class
tons.
that he had used this
It was
spell.
like a truck
He
falling
summoned
from the top
Loopy
of a
Toad's
mountain,
remnant soul.
constantly pressing on one's shoulders. Without any assistance, one's
Chapter
life might even be in
1155.
danger. As the saying
The fourth
went, the
stage
great
was the
Tao
safe
was the
stage.
simplest. Because
As
of
a
Mist
compulsory
Peak's
course in the first
geographical
semester of
location,
foundation
only the
establishment
top of the mountain
cultivation
had
high
zero
schools,
wind pressure.
the spirit
But
summoning
as someone
spell
who had already
was
reached the top,
self-evident in its
when Gao
importance.
Tianming saw
Wang Ling had
stroll through the
accidentally
second
summoned
stage in
Loopy
such a
Toad back
relaxed
then,
manner like
and
an
now
old
that he
man
saw the
strolling through
spirit
his back
summoning
garden,
spell again,
and even in
he
the
suddenly
third
felt
stage,
a sense of
Hell's
familiarity.
Phoenix Mist, now
It
that
was
they were
simply
being besieged
inconceivable
by
to
4
Gao
high
Tianming.
schools. and Zhu
He's actually
Hanyun
not
as the
affected in the
vanguard
slightest
had
by
failed.
such strong wind pressure,
had immediately thought
very
of using
quickly,
the spirit
Gao
summoning
Tianming
spell
noticed something
as a
off
joint
about Wang
encirclement
Ling.
and suppression method. There were over 40
He saw
people
that
in total
talismans
from
were
the 4
actually
high
burning
schools,
non-stop
and
on
if they
Wang
used
Ling's
the
right
spirit
hand.
summoning
That
spells
was a
together,
huge number of
they could
wind
summon no
stabilizing
fewer than
talismans.
several hundred spirits.
As long as he had these
Even if they
talismans,
couldn't
he would
hurt
be able
number
to
60
stand
high
tall
with
in a
these
typhoon.
spirits as the vanguard.
So it's not because
it was
of his
more than
strength.
enough to break through
The
the enemy's
sharpness in Gao
formation.
Tianming's eyes
Furthermore,
gradually
as a
faded
basic
as he
spell,
stared at
the
Wang
spirit
Ling,
summoning
who was
spell
burning the
didn't
wind
consume
stabilizing
much
energy
energy
to
to
begin
begin
with.
stop at the foot
After
of the mountain,
repeated
and he
summoning,
couldn't
the
help
number
but
of
smearing
spirits
in his
became
heart.
very large.
In his opinion,
When these
this
colorful
was just a
spiritual
weirdo who
bodies
was about to
surrounded
throw
them
his
from the
life
foot of the
away.
mountain,
Admittedly,
it still gave
there
people
was
a
no
shocking
need for
deja
Wang
vu
Ling to
feeling
use
like
the
they were in
wind
a sci-fi
stabilizing
blockbuster.
talismans.
The wind
pressure
pressure
of this
as a
mere
modern
mist
national
couldn't
natural
crush him.
spirit plant,
But considering that
this
this was a competition,
the spirits
and that
that
someone
could be
might be
summoned
paying
here were
attention to
naturally
their
not
movements
weak.
at any time,
The weakest
Wang
spirit
Ling
that could be
decided
summoned
to play
here
it
was
safe
at least a
and use
level
the
6
talismans to
spirit
conceal
beast.
his true strength.
Although Zhu Hanyun
In this
had
way,
lost
it would
an
look
arm,
like he was
it did not
borrowing the
affect
power
him
of
from
the
summoning a
talismans.
spirit with his
After
other arm.
successfully reaching
He
the top
summoned
of
a
the
level
mountain,
4
the
three-headed
wind on the
fire
mountaintop
lion.
calmed down,
For a foundation
and Wang Ling
establishment
naturally didn't
cultivator,
need to continue
being able to
burning the
summon a
talismans.
4th-class spirit
With
with
one
one
hand
hand
in
in
his
his trouser
trouser
pocket,
He
it
walked
could
in
only
Gao
be said that
Tianming's
Zhu
direction.
Hanyun was worthy
At
of
such
being
a close
the team
distance,
leader of
he
Titan
could
High
already
School.
sense the evil
Although
power
his vanguard
emanating from Gao
operation had
Tianming's
failed,
body,
it still
this
couldn't
wasn't
hide his
because the power
excellence.
of Shadow Dao
As
was
expected
evil.
of Captain
It was
Zhu.
because Shadow
As the
Dao
vanguard
stimulated
of
the
the
army
evil
of
in a
spirits.
person's heart
This
and awakened their
fourth-class
inner
three-headed
demons.
fire lion will
If you were a
definitely
good person
scatter
who
number
had
60
socialist
high's
core
formation.
values, who was
Seeing
well-rounded
the results
in all
of
aspects
everyone's
of
spirit
morality,
summoning,
intelligence,
Nanishio
physique,
felt that the
beauty,
situation
and
was
labor,
basically stable.
then not only would you
Although
obtain
the
the
spirits that
formidable
were
power
summoned
of Shadow
definitely
Dao,
wouldn't be as
you
strong
wouldn't
as
be
the real
eroded by
bodies,
evil, and would only have 20% of their fighting strength, they should be more than enough to deal with number 60
Chapter
high on the mountain.
1167.
The 4 high
The dual
schools
nature
were
of
now
Shadow
in an
Dao
alliance,
was a fatal
and it
flaw
was
that made it
understandable
easier
for
for
them to
evil
boast
people
about
to take
each other's
advantage of
businesses.
it.
But
for
Wang
some
Ling felt
reason,
that this
Zhu
flaw could
Hanyun,
be
who had
completely
already
fixed.
experienced the
After
strangeness
all,
of number
An
60 high
hadn't been
school,
born yet.
wasn't happy
Although
at all
she
when
might
he
be the
heard
strongest
Nanishio's
embryo
boast.
on Earth or
He
even
felt
in the
that
universe right now, her ability to control
60 high
Shadow
was
Dao
full
was
of crouching
definitely still
tigers
very
and
limited.
hidden dragons this
As long
time,
as An
and that
grew
the
up
whole
and got
school
rid
might
of the
have been
evil side of
underestimated.
Shadow Dao,
Before
it would still be a
participating in
Dao
the
that could
competition,
benefit all of
Zhu
humanity.
Hanyun vaguely
Wang
recalled
Ling
what
wasn't
their
sure
headmaster
whether Wang
Wuxia
Nuan would go berserk
had told
like
them
him
to
after
never
birth
look down
because
on
she
other
couldn't
schools,
control her strength,
especially number
but
60
he was sure
high.
that father and
Now
mother
that Zhu
Wang's
Hanyun
guidance
recalled the
wouldn't change.
principal's
As
instructions,
her big brother who had
felt the
experienced
depth
the pain of losing
The
control,
4 high schools
the only
were now
thing he
working
could do was
together
help
to
on
besiege
one of
number
number
60 high,
high, and they had the
ascending to the
advantage in
top by
numbers,
burning
which indeed seemed to
talismans.
be advantageous.
Number 60 high is
But
really
number
full of
60 high had
capable
already
people.
established
Everyone
a
in the
foothold on
command
mountain
center had
and had
noticed the
successfully
activity
set
on
up
the
camp.
top of Mist Peak
If
as
they
they
were to
watched the
adopt the
scene
defensive
unfold in front
strategy
of them.
and then make a
Earlier,
surprise
the
move,
image of
the
Wang
outcome
Zhen
would
being
be very
swallowed by Gao
unpredictable.
Tianming had been
Although
in a
they had
blind
the
spot
advantage in
and hadn't
numbers,
been
having
captured.
more people was
Until
also a
now, the
disadvantage.
command center still
In a
didn't know that
situation
Gao
where they
Tianming
didn't
had
have the
become a demon.
geographical advantage,
Thus, when
they
Wang
couldn't
Ling appeared
effectively
on the
integrate
mountaintop
their
in an
resources.
attempt to rescue Wang
Once they
Zhen,
fell into
the
a
headmasters
protracted
in the
battle,
command
it
center
would be
thought it was nothing
disadvantageous
more
to
than an
them.
ordinary showdown
On the other
between
side, at the
foundation
top of the mountain,
establishment cultivators.
number 60 high's
But
team
as Wang
swiftly
Ling's
came
chief
up with a
disciple,
strategy in the
Ajwa
face of the
instantly
spirit bodies
understood
that
what
were
Wang Ling
gradually
was trying
closing
to
in
do.
on them. He
In
knew
a
Wang Ling's
situation where they
personality
already
too well.
occupied the
They would
geographical
not easily
advantage,
appear on the
they would
front lines
naturally
and
choose
take
to
action.
defend.
Once he chose to
Furthermore,
make a
because
move,
of
he must
Ohai,
have encountered
number
some
60
sort of
high
trouble.
wasn't worried about
As
the
for
people at
burning
the foot of the
talismans
mountain
to
cutting
ascend
off
to
their
the
water
top,
supply.
it was most likely
Ohai
just
was
a
very
cover-up.
powerful.
As
As
long
Ajwa's
as they needed
disciple,
to, he could
even if
use
he
the
wasn't by
south-north
Wang
water
Ling's
diversion
side
to
wasn't
open up
even
the
the
overall
overall
and lead the
commander
nearby
this time.
river to their feet.
Ajwa could almost
The truth was
instantly
that the
understand
moment
the
these
task
spirit
of diverting
bodies appeared,
attention.
Gu
He
Xuanji had
immediately
already
gestured
thought
to
of
the control staff on the
16,020
side
ways
to cut
to
off the
eliminate them
image.
all in an
In
instant.
order to prevent this
But the
kind of
problem was that
situation
he
from
would
happening,
expose his true
Ajwa
strength.
and Granat
After
throwing
all,
senior
their purpose
immortal
in
had
coming to
already
number
taken safety high was to learn how to keep a low profile from Wang Ling, and this person had in fact been sent by the Office of Strategic Deception. So we should do the same.
Ajwa
secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Wang Ling cut off from the big screen. In
But
this
old
case,
Wang's
it was
next
nothing
words
more
made
than a matter of
tense
luck.
up again.
Given that their
What
spirit
for?
energy
I
levels
remember
were
the
about
list
the
saying
same,
that this Gao
Zhu
Tianyun
Hanyun
is
had
the
been able to
strongest
summon
freshman
a
in
number
number
one
one
devil-headed
three-headed
Duerhai,
and
he's
Super
also the
Chin
team
felt that
leader
he
that
could
summon one of similar
His
quality.
opponent was number
Gu
60 Hai's
Xuanji,
mascot,
using the spirit
student Wang
summoning
Ling.
spell as well,
Should be very interesting.
Actually, it wasn't impossible.
Ajwa,
But
given
the problem
old
was
Wang's
that Gu
status as the
Xuanji,
Shifu
Wang
of
Zhen, and the
President
others
Qi,
were well
one of the
aware
10
that if they used this strategy,
he could be
they
said
would
to be
also be
highly
respected in the
They could
cultivation
control their
world,
strength,
so
and
it
it
wouldn't be a
possible
problem
for
at all
Ajwa
for them
to
to
not have
accurately
good
summon a
judgment.
spirit. But who knew what terrible thing
As
their
soon
Ling
as old
Zhenren would
Huang
summon?
spoke,
He immediately knew
settled.
that he had no
I'll go
choice but to
first.
switch back.
As the team leader,
Fortunately,
Lotus Sun
Ajwa still
bravely
had
raised her
plan B.
hand.
This was also Wang Ling's backup plan, which was to prevent the scene from cutting back, and then slapped it hard on the ground. However, the scene they saw wasn't the real battle scene. As the spirit summoning array studio in lit up on the ground, a huge pure white flower came into view. Slightly chubby buffoons were already fully prepared. It looks like the snow hibiscus of 9 Dragon Mountains the scene had cut off for the first class spirit plant has a certain level of spiritual intelligence. The transformation stage, as expected, so not difficult for them to imitate the duel between two foundation establishment stage cultivators. Then everyone began to summon real-time projection effect, which could project body the master of Dopey summoned this time was a huge sky extremely realistic construction of the scene made it almost impossible to distinguish the real from the fake. Furthermore, it was a sixth-class spirit needed to do was use the transformation spell to change into Gao Tianming and Wang Ling's appearances. Then he used all kinds of small props prepared in advance to perform in real time. So he had secretly prepared these props early in the morning for a long time after he went back. Senior Immortal had previously investigated and obtained a complete list of magic treasures which students from various major schools might smuggle into the competition. You might not be a competition player. The puppet from number 1 Devil Subduing High was on the list. Softly and was now that it was Wang Ling and Gao Tianming's duel. Fatty Luo had obtained a special power from that mysterious white-haired youngster, put on the clothes which he had prepared beforehand, so the thing he could summon would naturally be unparalleled. Prop which he had personally developed. This time he had to put on a good show in front of Lotus hardware. Had been open for so long, started to make he had taken orders for all kinds of strange magic treasures, flowing water. So naturally he had this kind of puppet. Then what everyone didn't expect was, making puppets was not a difficult task for Fatty Luo. Activate the spirit summoning array. Isn't this puppet of yours a little too in front of everyone's eyes? When Boss Luo took out the puppet which he had designed, the Dharmaraja was completely stupefied. This spirit summoning array was so huge that it could be said that it would be better to directly call it an exquisite body of Fire Peak. Not only had it been painted and colored from top to bottom, even its figure himself was taken according to the golden ratio. The most important to show off that it was dressed in clothes, and was so exquisite that even its knuckles exceeded his expectations. Fatty Luo, with a resounding boom, understand. A giant lava hand also the size of a mountain gushed out of the huge spirit. In any case, I'm a magic treasure designer. I really can't bring out a crude and ugly puppet. Chapter which 11 Foundation Establishment Junior like Gao Tianming is using. No one knew exactly what had happened. I understand that, but the problem was dumbfounded. Why does your puppet look like the mountain spirit of Fire Peak was a super first-class nature creature. Only Lord Jinka was much more powerful, taking him so seriously. Xia Ming never thought that he would actually be able to directly summon the mountain spirit with the most basic spirit summoning spell. It's just an act, so don't go overboard. Everyone at the foot of the mountain was completely stupefied as they stared at the giant hand of molten salt stretching out to another peak. What the hell? What's that? I'll change to another one now, don't regret it. How can a foundation establishment student suddenly had a bad feeling? Even if that moment, as the two of them were talking, Aj was sent a signal from the command center. Retreat. The scene was about to be keep your distance. Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo were ready for battle, and had been observing the activity on the mountain the whole time. There was no doubt that this was an exchange between two acting masters. Exploded on the spot. Wang Ling, he played by Dharmaraja, at the same time expressionlessly at Gao in the command center played by Fatty Luo. And all the headmasters stood up in shock as they stared at the images on the screens. Had always been a man of few words. And if he spoke too much, it would be easy for him to give himself away. But as for Gao Tianming, yes, but it's only a small probability. Didn't know him very well. Is it a freak accident that a foundation establishment cultivator can summon a mountain spirit? And the headmasters in the command center saw the scene in the studio. Saving everyone's eyes were instantly subdued by the puppet behind Fatty Luo. A headmaster cried out in alarm. Why did student Gao's puppet style change so much? The mountain spirit had appeared, and its palm was like Gao Tianming's puppets were rather foundation establishment cultivators. Young people, it's actually very normal to have one or two this kind of natural creature would awaken every year. President Qi laughed on the side. It usually wouldn't show up in its true form. But I didn't expect student Gao Tianming's style to be so different. In fact, maybe he's a nerd. Most of these natural disasters were signs that the mountain spirit had awakened, and he couldn't help human activities disturbed the tranquility of nature. One devil subduing spirit would awaken. Headmaster went without saying how powerful they were. From your school sometimes just turning over as a puppet master, you can actually see this kind of power was also known as the power of nature. As the headmaster, at the same time, however, mountain spirits were stared at the sexy and graceful puppet behind rarely exposed to human cultivators. He remembered that some mountain spirits could sleep for hundreds or even thousands of years at a time. Happened the moment the scene had kept in the dark. Thus, these were the puppets that Fatty Luo had replaced in the second before the scene had awakened, and even they were made entirely of imitation human skin, and had men there immediately. Human puppets. Old Huang was instantly they were completely naked. The mountain spirit's untimely appearance made him think of an extremely low probability that number one devil subduing Hai's Gao Tianming wasn't satisfied. Do you suspect that there's an evil force behind this? President Qi instantly understood. A natural spirit like the mountain
Chapter
spirit could only be
1168.
disturbed by human
Actually,
malice. Audiobook had always felt that Fatty Luo and
would be very
Dharmaraja
difficult
had
for a
talent foundation
acting.
establishment
Although the
student
two of them
spirit
were
summoning
faking it
spell
and
to
weren't
rouse
punching
the
each
mountain
other,
spirit,
it still looked
unless
very
an even more
realistic.
evil existence
There was the
happened
sound
to be
of a
nearby.
foundation
Thus,
establishment
the instant
cultivator
that classmate
punching.
Xia Ming
The only
summoned
thing
the
that
spirit
didn't fit was the
evil power
completely
poured
different
in through the
puppet
channel
behind Fatty
opened by
Luo.
the spirit
This
summoning
was actually a
spell,
way of
and the mountain
contrasting the
spirit
two.
was instantly
It was like in a
awakened.
detective
If one were
mystery
to
movie
describe this
where the
feeling,
brilliant
it would
Sherlock
be like a
Holmes would be
person who
paired
was
with a
sleeping
Watson
soundly
who
being
kept asking
slapped in the
questions.
face.
A
Very
large
quickly,
part of the
reason
reason
why
why
Fatty
Fatty
Luo
Luo
had
had
chosen
chosen
to
to
destroy
destroy
Gao
Gao
Tianming's
Tianming's character
quickly
was actually
to set off
each of them
Ling
held a
Zhenren's
copy of
temperament.
the code of nature.
In particular,
and it was clear that they had prepared for a similar crisis. Although the probability of the mountain spirit waking up was very small, they couldn't rule it out. The code of nature looked as if Dharmaraja, who was playing Wang Ling, was using all kinds of fancy drifting moves, as long as it was combined with a certain sound wave spell. It would have the effect of soothing everyone the spirits was deeply attracted to Dharmaraja, but the situation at the scene was actually far worse than they had imagined. All the headmasters couldn't help praising him. Had been possessed by an evil force. I don't know why, but I feel that his strength had increased from number 60 high has an extraordinary temperament or second and is very lovable. Was actually quite basic, wonderful. But summoning the mountain spirit was a big problem. Technique. The human devil who had been following them and observing them in secret was so calmly that had awakened the violent and repeated changes in position. I can't wait any longer. This kind of rhythm is even better than that of a cultivator with a higher realm. What he hated the most was being disturbed. Also, did you see that when participate in the national competition this time, what he didn't want even more was to be disturbed. Given the current situation, it wasn't blown by the wind. The root cause, look carefully. It would be very difficult to coax the mountain spirit clearly using a lightning enchanting spell that could increase the damage done in close combat. His gaze was fixed on the shadow that had been following him for a long time in the dark. Body could stimulate his eight extraordinary meridians even in the middle of a fight. At the same time, causing his strength to rise continuously. When he saw the mountain spirit's true form. Who would have thought that this student from number 60 holy devil who looked so mediocre could devour would have such a clear battle mentality? If he could devour the mountain spirit, he would be 3 times stronger than he had been at his peak. His hair is standing on end because of the electric current, to make a move, and he looks like a super saiyan. He was being watched by a pair of eyes. He's just a foil to his peers. Like the sun. As the headmasters discussed this, causing the person who was hurt the most was naturally number 1 devil. He felt as if he was being stared at by a great power. In comparison, he was like a small meteorite that was being stared at, who was usually the most sedate person in their school. What was going on? To suddenly release himself during the competition. These were the two biggest questions in Xia Lixing's mind. He was in his hot-blooded adolescence, and he didn't have a girlfriend. In fact, it was a foundation established for him to have this kind of thing. But the problem was that you couldn't use it in the competition. Li Qingxi lowered his head and covered his face. Xia Lixing felt his 3 views start to crumble. As the headmaster, he could not bear to watch the duel in front of him. If his existence had been discovered, he felt as if he had been reduced to actions told Xia Lixing the answer. Number 60 High School's headmaster's gradually closed in. That seemingly he had already seen that number 1 devil subduing High's Xia Lixing's emotions were difficult to deal with among this batch of students. At first he was surprised, then he had been worried that Gao Tianming would steal the limelight from number 60 stretched out his hand and used the great purification persona would suddenly collapse. The spirits of all living things that Xia Lixing had recently devoured. No one chose to take the initiative to ridicule Principal Li Qingxi. It was only for a moment. This was the most fatal. Plants and dead spirit beasts in the sealed area. The general had led the mahjong trio in the dark had sometimes hurt people more than saying it out loud. Xia Lixing's whole body was weak. The confrontation between the real Wang Ling and Gao Tianming purification spell was far beyond Xia Lixing's imagination. Clearly a little astonished by Wang Ling's powerful effect of turning something rotten into something magical. Of Shadow Dao, who on earth puppets had fused with the power of Shadow image expression on his face, and were almost inherently intimidating. Even after Wang Zhen's strength was restricted by heavenly Dao, his battle strength was any of the mahjong trio that Wang Ling had seen before. And his hair stood on end when he was intimidated by Gao Tianming's puppets, but hadn't had time to digest them all. The youngster in front of him only slightly ruffled his bangs. Thus, your number 60 purification spell had directly reduced him to his original state. At Wang Ling with a particularly using the king's eye to connect to the power. He even had reason to suspect that Wang Ling wasn't the human devil in front of him was in fact already dead. In that instant, he was already dead. In that case, he should just sleep forever. When he had given him the frozen without any nonsense. White hair had told him that if he ran into a guy with dead fish eyes, forehead with he should avoid fighting him as much as possible. And now this dead fish eye had appeared in front of Chapter 1157. When a person suddenly obtained power after longing for it for a long time, made Wang Ling realize that his previous guess had been spot on. Gao Tianming was a typical example. Whether it was by Yu Quan, Wang Ling had already sensed Gao Tianming's intentions when he had captured in the Nine Dragon Pagoda. The other party didn't look like he was going to escape behind the scenes. Gao Tianming wasn't very old this year, was to control life and death and defy the heavens to change fate. But after fusing with the power of Shadow Dao, his cultivation had increased by more than 16 years. Under the control of the current cultivation was close to 3,000 years. Of many parallel worlds stronger than a high-level itinerant at a critical moment and infinitely close to a true immortal. Thus, a normal it had to be noted that the average strength of the headmasters in the command center was only slightly above the soul formation stage. This was one of the top 10 spells of Wang Ling's 30,000 headmasters were at the itinerant immortal level. All things in the universe. This was why Wang Wan's shadow evil spirit would dissipate into nothingness. It could instantly elevate the great foundation establishment cultivator to such a frightening level. After Xia Lixing was hit by the great transcendence spell, even if he was constantly resurrected on the spot because of unborn little sister might be joking Wang Ling didn't remove this kind of leap in realm was really a little too exaggerated. The power of transcendence would always exist. But Wang Ling was very willing to make a move this time. Was now performing because in his opinion was a rare death Tianming was indeed someone didn't know how many fate Dao the person behind the scenes was also a person who had fused with the power of Shadow Dao. If he had only been allocated 100 times like by Yuquan, furthermore it was all within his control. 100 times. The people who had been 3,000 dumplings earlier would have died 3,000 times. For example, with human devil Xiang, who had eaten the frozen dumplings in order to clear his son's name, he had combined the power of 100 his Dao into one, ultimately overturning the case of magic treasure plagiarism. Wang Ling felt that when all was said and done, Bai Yuquan was still too young, that the power of Shadow Dao would be too strong, Bai Yuquan was still very tight, cause him to lose control of his heart and be consigned to eternal damnation as a mortal. But Gao Tianming's fusion was would be punished by lightning every day until he told the truth. And so, 1 minute later, might be because Gao Tianming himself died 600 times under Wang Ling's great transcendence spell as deeply curious about Gao Tianming. He was dead for good. It hadn't been easy for him to encounter someone with complete 1 second was recorded. Even wanted to study Gao Tianming's Shadow Dao space in depth and analyze what the structure of the space no one had seen this scene. But at that moment, cast the spell from a relatively hidden kite puppets that Gao Tianming was controlling suddenly started dealing with Xia Lixing. Like pointers, they spun at high speed the moment as if nothing had happened. Then with they opened their first generation demon, the restless mountain spirits regained their tranquility, which was combined with the power of Shadow Dao. With blazing lava. It was similar to an advanced illusion spell, and the mountain spirit of fire peaked once again and fell into its confrontation. But the truth was that there was a sealed space inside that outsiders couldn't detect. In other words, fortunately, the entire space had already been locked from the inside. Otherwise, all the living beings on fire with the power of Shadow Dao because of the awakening of the mountain illusion detection spell. After all, apart from Wang Ling at all. Almost no one could resist the power of nature. Classmate Wang Ling had never thought that he would be forced to take a lesson on protecting nature in this nine-dragon mountain national body technique competition, and he could do whatever he wanted. But in reality, things weren't over yet. Little did he know. First, the mastermind behind the scenes had yet to be found. Second, the Eye of Rebellion curse on Xiaming had yet to be lifted. Xiaming still had lingering fears that he had inadvertently summoned the mountain spirit and almost caused massive destruction. More than 3,000 ways to get rid of Gao Tianming perfectly. And after the mountain spirit had calmed down, his expression was still blank, Shadow Dao and he hadn't come back to his senses at all. The warning was lifted, and the magic ball that it was now too late for him to responsible for monitoring abnormal energy calmed down again. He just wanted to take back the power on the dashboard. The moment the mountain spirit had woken up, the darkness and fluctuations of spirit power on the dashboard. This was the best method Wang Ling could think, and then dropped the situation really escalated like a roller coaster. At that moment, Gao Tianming had pretended to be smart and had sealed off the mountain spirit. Woke up, yawned, but he had ended up helping Wang Ling instead. It's very strange. With no one around to disturb him, Wang Ling could use his ability. President Qi also frowned. He took a step forward. In their view, the mountain spirit was only a single step for no reason at all. But a tremendous pressure instantly fell like a waterfall of the Milky Way. As for the fact that forming an overwhelming pressure that made it difficult for Gao Tianming foundation establishment stage, that could in fact be explained as a coincidence. His face full of astonishment, the mountain spirit had already shown signs of waking up. In his opinion, this should have been a good way to use the power Shadow Dao to catch a turtle in a jar. It just so happened to have the effect of a sobering agent. But he never thought that this turtle would actually be him. The suspicious point wasn't the power of a foundation establishment. They still had to find out why the mountain spirit had been alarmed. Are you and I the same kind of person? The laws of nature are the lifeline of human life and death. Eyes in front of him, no matter how high our cultivation levels are or how long we can live, but he couldn't get an answer. Planet suitable for the same kind of person. It doesn't matter how high our cultivation levels are or how long we can live. Shadow Dao was we've made a breakthrough. It wasn't even 1 billion of other planets recently, and discovered Divine Dao Star. Analyzed Shadow Dao but Divine Dao Star is although he wasn't very proficient at it, and there are many other alien life forms living on it. In the end, cultural differences are troublesome, and it's unrealistic for us cultivators to immigrate there at the moment. Had been born with. Old Huang said hurriedly. This was what he had learned. The most important thing is to protect what's in front of us.
Many of the headmasters present nodded at these words. Comprehended when he was indeed important to look into the future. Shadow Dao was still to focus on the present. Those frozen dumplings, in the current cultivation world, little humans weren't united enough. Wang Ling and there were still many loopholes that hadn't been addressed. These were the 4 great Dao that Wang Ling currently mastered. The recent case of the doctor's murder was actually another example. Outer Dao, cultivators who had devoted themselves to the medical cause with a heart full of passion had died under the blades of villains for no reason because of some hysterical patients. It was just a branch of the heavenly Dao. Needed to be made up previously by Youchuan's father, but it was precisely because of this need for change that cultivators could progress little by little and slowly make the world more far inferior to the heavenly Dao. Old Qi. So in summary, compared with Wang Ling, President Qi heard General Bai's voice couldn't be considered phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. The command center has received your message, a chicken feather and a chick at General Bai. That Xia Lixing seems to be more cunning than I thought. Unfortunately, we've already lost the target. Clearly didn't know what true power was. Can we relocate him? It was just as Nanny Xiu had said. President Gao Tianming was a crazy man. He spread out his mental until the very last moment. Miss a single when Gao Tianming truly felt the gap between their strengths. When Xia Lixing was alive back then, he had been one of the members of the operation team that had been hunting him down, so he felt a natural sense of familiarity with this human devil. In the next moment, a person couldn't disappear for no reason. Hysterically as he manipulated 2 puppets to flank Wang Ling was sure that he had to have used some method to hide his tracks. That was after a round of searching, President Qi found the result dealt with Wang Zhen previously. His eyes darkened. The more dexterous mechanism design allowed the hook-shaped golden wheels at the Slayer Xia Lixing is to spin rapidly as it said as he opened his eyes. Wang Ling could see that Gao Tianming was intent on killing him. With the power of Shadow Dao attached to them, if neither you nor the 2 Slayers could now spin more than 100 million times per second. A person can't disappear for no reason. Split gold and break stone. Xia Lixing's demonic nature is too strong. But it's impossible that couldn't compare to Wang Ling's hula hoop speed. But how did he die? 7 years old. You have to give a reason. Back then, when Wang Ling was far from being as powerful as he was now, it was hard to hide the solemnity on his face. Had already reached 200 million times per second. President Qi looked at Odd on the side and confirmed that he hadn't left just now. And directly take off from the ground like a helicopter propeller, was most likely out of the earth for this kind of bizarre incident. But as the saying went, a real man doesn't boast about his past exploits. Chapter 11. Those were all the tricks he had played when he was young. Let us welcome the host of this New Year's showing them off in front of outsiders. Student Wang Ling with a round of applause. But it was precisely because of his hula hoop experience back then. Dog 2 stared at his flowing green hair as he calmly later learned the skill of hula hoop in the void. Dog 2 wasn't the host of this New Year's disc conference, Wang Ling could only rely on the programs of his waist to twist and turn. Just activating the 10% of his strength to bring the 3 protagonists together in the same space had already cost 99% of the budget. The Slayers to attack. This New Year's disc conference almost held in Kushuan's pigeon to twist his slender waist at a high frequency. Rang out in the audience because the speed was so fast. Throwing senior immortal could actually see Wang Ling's eyes were brimming with blurry and hazy state. Because in this disc Wang Ling twisted and turned, this man who didn't have more than 10 lines in a year was finally going just like a high frequency ghost animal video for your enthusiastic applause. When the 2 Slayers collided with Wang Ling at a speed of 1 billion times per second zone, there was naturally the only one outfish in the cultivation world: destruction. When the Slayers exploded next to Wang qualified to be a guest today, and only became one through a lucky draw. Simply couldn't believe his eyes. Let us welcome classmate Qin the size of a palm fell to the ground and rolled to Gao Tianming's on the sofa. When Gao Tianming's face was indescribably excited when Loopy Toad called his nearest body. He quickly walked onto the stage and faced the audience. He hadn't clearly seen what Wang Ling had done at all, eating crispy and his Slayers had actually directly exploded just like that. As you can see, including me, we actually have 5 guests today. That is Gao Tianming, classmate Xiang Yi, classmate he was very loud, classmate Sun, and his volume was extremely intimidating. But as you can see, mental patient yelling hysterically noodles has already been eaten by the host's eyes. This was just incompetent rage. You can see what kind of ferocious attacks have no effect on me. That even the guests are This was the first time he had spoken to Gao Tianming since the start of the battle, and it could be considered a kind reminder. It was only after seeing the Slayer that Wang Ling is the man who inherited a wasteland cultivation then that he had seen the Slayer. He made his fortune by shuttling back and forth when it was rotated at a low speed, picking up trash and when the speed of rotation increased, I have to say this is also the most difficult to clearly see what he was doing. He can be called the model body had become a sage long ago. Even if he win the lottery while lying down, the Slayers would just be seeking their own destruction. As long as classmate Wang Ling lies down, I'm going to turn you into my collection. He can be the protagonist. Gao Tianming's eyes were red as he died who knows how many times since the book began. Although he didn't know why Wang Ling, Pigeon, has allowed him to experience all kinds of novel ways to die. He already seriously suspect that in Wang Pigeon's real world, there's a brother called Xiang Yi who once offended old thief Gao Tianming, who was then written into the book. With a snap of his fingers, Xiang Yi nodded like a chicken pecking rose from the ground and materialized behind him. I've always had this Gao Tianming's shadow image. Qin a clown on strings, mini and evil. Let's focus on student Lin Wan. As you can see, student Lin Wan is the only female lead in our 3 books. Chapter 1170. The evil clown who was as tall as Gao Tianming obviously doesn't even have a disgusting smell, but he gave Xiang Yi a girlfriend. It had a blood-red nose,
especially set Lin wanted to have a toxic constitution.
And even the moles at the corners of its eyes were like sharp blades that could cut a person's heart.
Next, student
it was
Lotus
as if
Sun.
it could instantly plunge a person into a terrifying atmosphere. Who was sitting in the guest seat,
clown's head
straightening her back and greeting everyone with a smile on her face. These strings were none other than 4 pieces of intestines. Cleared his throat. The scene looked a little disgusting,
I'm very sorry,
but it was in fact just a psychological effect caused by the shadow image.
I can't find anything
to complain about. It also
as a woman who was once
forgotten by
Kushan Pigeon,
once his
student
inner demon
Lotus
was
activated,
activated,
her best to stand
the
out
dark
in the
side
later
of his
parts
heart
of the
would
story,
directly reflect on the shadow image. It was all to no avail.
If the power
Perhaps
of shadow
it was for this reason that student Lotus
the shadow image
became
would
the
probably
female
be
lead
something
in
like
the
a
Immortal
weapon
King
spirit.
cartoon.
It might not be as good-looking as Jinka or
Mysterious
Mysterious,
but
Lotus
at the very
Sun,
least, it would be a humanoid creature that looked normal.
heaved a deep sigh,
Wang Ling
then
frowned
looked
at
at
the
Wang Ling
horrifying
in the
scene in
host's seat.
front of him. Finally,
his first
let's
reaction
focus on
after
the man
seeing
who
the scene
ate the
was
guest
to give
the
the very
remaining
beginning.
packets of braised
Wang Ling,
intestine-flavored
crispy
crispy
noodle snacks
a lot
at
of
home
people
to the
say that
heavenly
I became a
Tao as an
protagonist
equivalent
because I
exchange.
bribed student
After
Wang
all,
Ling.
he was still a
But the truth is
16-year-old
that
kid.
as the only
It was
koi in the
inevitable that he
cultivation
would feel a
world,
little
I
nauseous
refused
at
to be
this
a
kind of
koi in
scene.
the beginning.
So now
Everyone
Wang Ling
knows
was
that
doing
I
his
threw
best
away
not
the
to
express
throw up his
delivery
churning
package
stomach
from the
acid.
immortal continent.
If a drop fell
But
to the
fate has
ground,
chosen
given
me.
his stomach
In the
acid's
new year,
ability,
I hope
it
that
might
everyone will
directly
be
burn
as
a
lucky
hole
as
through
me,
the earth,
and that you
on
will
the other
pass
side,
every test
looking
and
at
turn
Wang Ling
misfortune
clutching
into
his
fortune.
stomach.
I heard that as long as you leave a
threat
message
was
in this
beginning to work.
paragraph and make a wish,
His shadow
Ling
image was
Zhenren will
called
definitely
Puppet
bless
Clown.
you. And it
Thank
had the
you.
effect of
I am
creating
Qingzong.
illusions and fear in
Dog
people's
2.
hearts.
Student
Once
Qing's
you fell
speech is
into
very
it, the more
touching.
you looked at it,
But
the
as the
more terrifying
protagonist
it
of
would feel.
Kushan's third new book,
He felt that it was
let's hear what
already
student
impressive that
Xiang Yi
Wang
has to
Ling
say.
hadn't fainted on the spot.
Xiang Yi, hello
Student
everyone,
Wang Ling,
I'm that
stop
man who has
struggling.
died so many
I'll
times
definitely
that even
turn
my
you
ashes
into my
have been
collection.
scattered. But
Gao
I'm still
Tianming
alive and
smiled
kicking
sinisterly.
A lot of people
With a
think
thought,
that Pigeon
several
Kushan has a
large
grudge against
intestines
me,
flew out of
but
the
I
puppet
actually think
clown's
that he wrote
abdomen
me
to
into
wrap
this
around
third
Wang
book as a
Ling's
way to
limbs.
divert attention.
He wanted to drag
He's trying
Wang
to
Ling
avoid
into
the
the
fact
shadow
that he has
image
fallen
world.
in love with
Tentacle
cross-dressing.
play.
He's
Wang
trying
Ling
to
didn't
drown
like to play
himself in the
tentacles
ocean of
with a man,
writing, so that he can
He
forget
opened
his
his penchant
penchant
for
and stared
cross-dressing.
at the large intestines
The
flying
voice
toward
of the
him.
masses
As
can't
he
be
stared
forgotten.
these large
I hope that
intestines
everyone can
actually
speak
slowed
up in
down
this
midway.
paragraph and let
This
old
was
thief
the passive
Kushan
effect
hear
of
the
the
voice of
king's
the
eye.
masses.
Don't touch me.
Sorry, I might have
Once
been a little
Wang
too
Ling
excited.
showed a look of resistance.
It's mainly because I
These
finally
unknown
met my
creatures
idol,
that tried to
student
approach
Wang
him
Ling
would
before I
instantly
came.
turn to ashes
I once
if they
asked
still
Pigeon
persisted.
Kushan why all
Therefore,
three of us
these
are
large
protagonists
intestines
and
instantly
why student
stopped
Wang
after
Ling can be the
decelerating
main
in
character.
midair. Later,
Under
I
Wang
realized
Ling's
that
king's
the
eye,
three of us
they
mean
didn't
different
dare
things
take
to
half a
Kushan.
step forward.
As everyone knows, Pigeon Kushan has the
As a
habit
shadow
of writing
image,
theme
the
songs
clown
for the
puppet was
protagonist
controlled
of
by
his
Gao
books.
Tianming's will,
Student
but it
Qingzong
also
had
had
a
a
certain
certain
level of
custom-made
intelligence
theme
and
song.
wouldn't do anything to harm itself. This was because once the shadow image appeared, it would be bound to the body of the original owner. Any damage the shadow image received would be reflected back to the original owner. Gao Tianming was clearly surprised by the puppet's hesitation. He had never encountered such a situation before, and he couldn't imagine that his shadow image would actually be afraid. Not only was it synchronized on the physical level, but it was also synchronized on the mental level. At that moment, Gao Tianming could clearly sense that his clown puppet was trembling slightly with fear in its heart. In the next moment, his king's eye turned into a sharp sword that directly stabbed at the clown puppet. He used his own force to tear open the crack leading to the shadow image world. Wang Ling knew that a lot of people were still trapped in the shadow image's internal world. If he directly got rid of the clown puppet now, those people would die along with it. At this point in the battle, Gao Tianming finally deeply felt that Wang Ling's strength was almost beyond his understanding. Previously, he had controlled the shadow image to swallow people, but this person in front of him had forcibly used his own ability to tear open a crack like a roasted duck, and then stepped in. It was when Wang Ling entered the shadow image world that Gao Tianming truly felt like he had a mental breakdown. The so-called shadow image world was in fact a small world space constructed by the shadow image using its own mental energy. Now that Wang Ling had entered this small world, it was the same as forcibly stepping into this spiritual domain. When this behemoth of energy suddenly poured into the spiritual world, Gao Tianming fell to his knees with a splitting headache. He was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered as he curled up on the ground, clutching his head as his entire body twitched with a headache. Wang Ling had forced his way in, which would definitely cause some damage to his mind. But in terms of Dao, this was also Gao Tianming's own doing, who told him to turn so many people into puppets and put them into his sweatshop in the shadow image world. In the puppet sweatshop, the people who had already been turned into collectibles toiled endlessly like machines. Strapped to their bodies, they carried one brick after another to where they needed to be built. They were both collectibles and cheap labor. After entering the shadow image world, Wang Ling was even more aware of how terrifying the dark power in the depths of Gao Tianming's heart was. In this puppet factory, Wang Ling could sense a power that could make people lose themselves.
All the people who had been turned into puppets here had given up struggling and resisting, and their human thoughts would be extracted little by little. They would gradually forget their own names, forget the people around them, and then gradually lose all memories of being human. Most of the people who had been turned into puppets by Gao Tianming were Foundation Establishment students. Foundation Establishment cultivators had weaker minds and willpower, and were more likely to be assimilated by this spiritual world. The most severely affected people had already completely lost themselves here. Wang Ling spotted a familiar figure in the line of people carrying bricks in front of him, who was being whipped and tortured. Everything was as Wang Ling had thought. He had sensed Wang Zhen's aura disappear earlier, and sure enough, it was because Gao Tianming had plotted against him, and he had been sucked into the shadow image world to become a puppet. He saw Wang Zhen turn into a puppet on strings. It was as if he was being strung up by 4 uncontrollable steel wires, and his body was constantly working uncontrollably. Wang Ling just stood at a distance and watched this scene. He didn't know if Wang Zhen had already been assimilated, or how much of his will he still had left. But he saw that this man's eyes were different from those of the other puppets. There was a resolute look in his eyes, as if he hadn't given up thinking about how to leave this place. Until the moment when their gazes collided. Wang Zhen's spirit was suddenly shaken, and he instantly became excited. Ling Zhenren. He shouted in his heart, completely believing that Wang Ling could hear his thoughts. Wang Ling was about to praise Wang Zhen for actually not losing himself in such a terrifying shadow image world, when Wang Zhen unexpectedly said, "Ling Zhenren, you're finally here. I've been thinking about how to not lose myself in this space, so I deliberately acted lowly here and asked for a beating. The moment the whip hit me, I felt comfortable and remembered everything." Hearing this, Wang Ling slowly let out a question mark. Why did this guy sound like he was enjoying it? Chapter 1171. The reason why Wang Zhen hadn't lost himself when he was trapped in the sweatshop was that he actually enjoyed the feeling of being beaten. Wang Ling couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air when he heard this earth-shattering reason. It could only be said that Wang Zhen was in the end Wang Zhen. As a man who had been beaten up since he was a child, but who had still tenaciously survived to this day, Wang Ling couldn't help feeling deeply moved by Wang Zhen's experiences. There were so many geniuses in the world, and Wang Zhen actually hadn't started out as good as them. But after being beaten up, Wang Zhen's strong desire to survive had caused his hidden potential to burst forth, and he had finally awakened it after being beaten up round after round, and this was the reason why Wang Zhen had become stronger. A person's character was formed at a young age, and a large part of it was also because of the family environment. Wang Zhen's habit of being beaten up would probably never change in this lifetime. In some sense, Wang Ling felt that the irascible Miss Lu and Wang Zhen were really a good match. Wang Zhen was a meat shield, and Lu Qingyi was born with a fiery temper. Wang Zhen had been used to all kinds of beatings since he was a child, so his endurance was naturally better than that of an ordinary person. If these two people were together, it would be like a balance of yin and yang, but sometimes, emotional matters couldn't be forced. Wang Ling wasn't Mr. Matchmaker, and he wouldn't force his way into other people's relationships. Even if he randomly chose a couple, he had to follow the basic rules. In the next moment, Wang Ling raised his hand to cast a spell, using his current understanding of Shadow Dao to reconstruct this shadow image world. He had to finish this battle quickly, and couldn't drag things out for too long in this shadow image world. The longer he dragged things out, the greater the damage to Gao Tianming's spirit. After casting the spell for about 3 seconds, Wang Ling snapped his fingers, and all the puppets in the puppet factory in front of him were cleanly cut off. Then, their bodies began to turn into particles of light and swiftly disappear. This process was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, Wang Zhen had already returned to reality. All the rescued students were lying neatly on the ground. The change in world had put a lot of pressure on them, and shuttling back and forth had caused a lack of oxygen, which was the main reason why they had fainted. So Wang Zhen was the only one awake. At that moment, Wang Ling stretched out his hand to support Gao Tianming's forehead. Gao Tianming knelt on the ground and cried out in pain, but no one could hear his gut-wrenching voice. A few minutes later, Wang Ling pulled out a black shadow from Gao Tianming's body. It smelled of evil, and under Wang Ling's guidance, it first lingered around his fingertips before slowly coalescing in the center of his palm into a black ball the size of an egg. Finally, Wang Ling pressed down with a flip of his hand, and on the side, Wang Zhen saw several golden chains emerge from the air to lock the black ball in place before dragging it into the air. At this point, the seal was a success. Heaven Dao Lock. Wang Jin recognized the origin of those chains. These golden chains originated from the power of the six main heavenly Tao. Wang Jin had always known that Wang Ling was very strong, and that they weren't on the same level, but the appearance of the heavenly Tao lock had still startled him. Nowadays, it wasn't uncommon to see people with heavenly Tao, especially in the domain of the gods, where heavenly Tao ability users were as numerous as the hairs on an ox. But knowing heavenly Tao and understanding heavenly Tao were two different things. Those with heavenly Tao would never dare say that they understood heavenly Tao. There were countless mysteries of heavenly Tao. One universe had 3,000 heavenly Tao, and 10 universes had 30,000 heavenly Tao. Among these 30,000 heavenly Tao, it wasn't easy for some people to spend their entire lives pursuing just one and prying into the mysteries of heavenly Tao. As for the so-called Heaven Tao lock, it was in fact a symbol of complete domination and control over the power of heavenly Tao. Ling Jinren, who on earth are you? Wang Jin started to feel curious about Wang Ling's identity. Wang Ling, but the truth was that even Wang Ling himself didn't know who he was. Who the hell knew why he was so strong? And the most frightening thing was that he wasn't someone who had been reborn at all. He didn't have a setting for rebirth at all. Seeing that Wang Ling had nothing to say, Wang Jin knew that his words might have offended him, so he didn't pursue the matter. But he still had doubts about Gao Tianming. Why didn't Ling Jinren directly destroy this evil power? Instead he chose to seal it? Seal it? This was the best method Wang Ling could think of at the moment. He explained this to Wang Zhen telepathically. Because Gao Tianming's situation was a little special, his shadow Tao was too deeply integrated. If his shadow image was directly destroyed, Gao Tianming would also die. Thus, choosing to seal it was the safest method. Gao Tianming himself wouldn't be affected by the seal, but would be unable to use the power of shadow Tao. After rescuing everyone, the first thing Wang Ling did was to use the Great Memory Spell's memory replacement ability to completely replace everyone's memories of shadow Tao. In essence, Gao Tianming was also a victim. He wasn't a bad person by nature, but because of his intense competitiveness and desire to improve himself, he had been used by people with ulterior motives. Next, the key was to ferret out the mastermind behind the scenes. Wang Ling had initially wanted to let nature take its course. Based on his past experience, he knew that someone would definitely stir up trouble in this national competition. But he had never expected that this troublemaker would actually involve Wang Nuan's power of shadow Tao. This immediately made Wang Ling feel a sense of crisis. The power of shadow Tao wasn't stable yet, and abuse of it could lead to a devastating crisis. Using his unborn little sister to do bad things was something Wang Ling couldn't forgive no matter what. I need your help. At that moment, Wang Ling turned to Wang Zhen. Ling Jinren, please speak. Wang Zhen was terrified. Wang Ling's task was very simple. He wanted Wang Zhen to be a human radar responsible for searching for other people in this competition who had the power of shadow Tao. Wang Ling had pretty much mastered shadow Tao, but if he used this power himself he might lose control. So the best way was for Wang Zhen to check on his behalf. It's my duty. Wang Zhen agreed without hesitation. He didn't need to eat any frozen dumplings and just stretched out his hand to touch Wang Zhen's forehead. In the next breath, it was as if the shadow under Wang Zhen's feet had been imbued with some kind of magic, and it visibly became three-dimensional before finally turning into a shadow image in the shape of a person. A normal shadow image was in human form. This was a burly man with very thick muscles. The burly man only wore a pair of white underpants, and the clothes on his body were quite unique. They were actually coiled ropes. This was Wang Zhen's exclusive shadow image, called Man Tied Up. After seeing the shadow image clearly, Wang Ling sighed in his heart, as expected of you. Chapter 1172. Every shadow image had its own name. The reason why a shadow image normally took the form of a human was because it represented what a person's heart longed for, and the shadow image's abilities were derived from that heart's longing. Tied Man Wang Ling used the King's Eye to test Tied Man's strength. If the shadow image was divided into 10 levels of strength, Tied Man was at level 6. Its advantages were long hands and strong growth potential. Although it was only level 6 now, if Wang Jin used the strength properly, it was still possible for it to level up in the future. Is this my shadow image? Why does it feel so wretched? Wang Jin stared at this muscular man wrapped in ropes and felt that what he was seeing was a little unreal. He was such an upright person, but his shadow image was actually like this. The point was that Wang Zhen thought that his sexual orientation was normal, so why was his shadow image such a muscular otaku who was even fatter than Kushuan? The people behind the scenes are in this 9 Dragon Mountain area. If I make a move it'll be too obvious. You're responsible for finding them. Wang Ling spoke telepathically to Wang Zhen. He had activated Wang Zhen's shadow image so that Wang Zhen could secretly search for their whereabouts. Then Wang Ling brought over one of Gao Tianming's puppets and cast a spell called the Great Illusion spell on it. This was a real illusion that could confuse anyone's eyes. Wang Ling turned Gao Tianming's puppet into Wang Zhen's appearance. Although it looked a little wooden, it was enough to pass off as the real thing. I'll leave it to you. Wang Ling then left with this puppet which had turned into a fake Wang Zhen. Don't worry Ling Zhenren. Wang Zhen replied after confirming their gazes. But to ensure the success of this operation, Wang Ling had arranged for 2 other people to assist Wang Zhen. Thus, after Wang Zhen watched Wang Ling leave the barrier, Loopy Toad and Little Silver jumped out from the side and quickly helped Wang Zhen change into the Special Forces uniform. You're not Ling Zhenren's? Although Loopy Toad had already turned into a human, Wang Zhen was still able to quickly recognize that the person in front of him was Loopy Toad itself, judging from its emerald green hair and its human form. We received Master's order to help you uncover the people behind the scenes, Little Silver replied swiftly. The key now was to find out who the mastermind was. He faced Wang Zhen and saw the shadow image behind him. So this is what your shadow image looks like? It doesn't match you at all. So your heart yearns for bondage? Wang Zhen was a little embarrassed. It's all a misunderstanding, Little Silver, no need to explain, we all understand. Saying that, Little Silver also showed his shadow image. Wang Ling had helped them activate it remotely just now. Little Silver's silhouette was very normal and also in human form. This was a vigilante with waist-length hair and dead fish eyes. He wore a hood over his head and was clad in thick leather armor. However, this vigilante's weapon was neither a sword nor an arrow. Instead, it was a collar around his neck. So, the collar is a weapon? The corner of Wang Zhen's mouth twitched. Apart from his more normal appearance, Little Silver's shadow image didn't seem much better. More importantly, this was a collar. This meant that Little Silver wanted to be caught in the collar. I really want someone. It's best if it's Master who can take me for a walk on the streets. Little Silver spoke his innermost thoughts. He had always had this desire in his heart, but unfortunately, as one of the few holy beasts left in the world, Little Silver had to abide by the principle of keeping a low profile like Wang Ling. He didn't want to be hunted down and slaughtered like Dog Saint because of the rumors about the heart of a holy beast back then. The last remaining bone had been developed into the Bone King, which had fallen into Loopy Toad's hands. The power of the shadow image symbolized a person's inner desire. Thus, it wasn't too strange for a vigilante to wear a collar around his neck. It was just that Wang Zhen was curious to see how it would play an actual role in a real battle. Then let's go, Loopy Toad said at that moment. Aren't you going to show me? I'll leave you with something to remember, Croak. Gao Tianming is still unconscious. What should we do? We'll walk out of the barrier, and the image in the command center will switch to this place. Dharmaraja and Fatty Luo are acting, and the ending of the battle will be a fierce collision between Little Master Ling and Gao Tianming, which will lead to an explosion that will cause someone on Mist Peak to fall unconscious, Loopy Toad said at that moment. The script for this battle had been predetermined, and had already been arranged clearly. Thus, after Wang Zhen left with Loopy Toad and Little Silver, the protective talismans on everyone on Mist Peak were triggered. As the protective golden light soared into the sky, the teachers patrolling nearby swiftly rushed over. At this point, the students from number 1 Devil Subduing High and the other schools were eliminated. In the command center, Headmaster Li Qingxi had a vexed expression on his face. It was only the second day. Their number 1 Devil Subduing High's hot favorite to win the championship was already gone? Where's Wang Ling? Why can't I see classmate Wang Ling? When the image switched back to the real scene, Headmaster Li Qingxi shouted excitedly. He stared at the scene of the search and rescue, his eyes sweeping the area for those dead fish eyes, but he couldn't find any trace of Wang Ling. Old Li, you're anxious. On the side, Headmaster Chen smiled slightly. Obviously, if Wang Ling isn't here, it means that he was sent flying by the explosion just now, and his life isn't in danger. This is the top of Mist Peak. How can he not be in danger after being sent flying off a cliff? Headmaster Li was very agitated. He desperately hoped that Wang Ling would also be eliminated, otherwise number 1 Devil Subduing High would lose all face. An alliance of so many schools had actually been directly wiped out by one person. This was simply unimaginable. Have you forgotten the terrain of Mist Peak? Headmaster Chen analyzed the situation. I'm guessing that student Wang Ling must have been affected by the special terrain of Mist Peak after being sent flying. The moment he fell, the nearby airflow rose up. The moment he fell, the surrounding airflow rose up, causing air resistance to increase, and in the end he landed smoothly. How is that possible? Li Qingxi couldn't believe it. Was this the power of number 60 High's mascot? Headmaster Li slumped in his seat, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. Very quickly, Headmaster Chen's words were confirmed by a screen in the command center, because when the image switched back to number 60 High's camp, someone saw that Wang Ling had already returned to the camp with the previously missing Wang Zhen. On the screen, Wang Ling looked a little dirty. It was clear that he had just been through a big battle. Since he was putting on a show, he had to do it to the end. Of course, Wang Ling wasn't injured. He had just used the great spell of filth to make himself dirty. This spell wasn't meant to be used in this kind of place and was only used to make gourmet food. For example, dirty buns. Chapter 1173. After Wang Ling safely returned to number 60 High's camp with the fake Wang Zhen, Super Chin heaved a long sigh of relief when he saw Wang Ling reappear. You're finally back, damn. I heard from Nan Yixio that you went to Mist Peak alone to fight Gao Tianming? You're that brave? Did you cheat? Wang Ling. As an outstanding successor to cultivation socialism, Wang Ling had always been too lazy to use cheats as impractical as this. Since he was a cheat, there was no need for him to use it. Wang Ling was worried that he wouldn't be able to explain what had happened just now. Audiobook was naturally prepared for this. He had arranged for a member of the Special Forces, who was on his way to rescue Mist Peak, to deliberately pass above number 60 High's camp. Sure enough, he was intercepted by the students here. Teacher, what on earth happened at Mist Peak? Nan Yixio took the initiative to ask. He felt that it definitely wouldn't be easy for Wang Ling to bring Wang Zhen back. Who was Wang Ling? Number 60 High's mascot with the weakest combat strength. To be able to snatch Wang Zhen back from a lunatic like Gao Tianming, he must have negotiated some conditions. But at the same time, Nan Yixio felt a little puzzled, because it was obvious that this member of the Special Forces had been heading in the direction of Mist Peak, which proved that a big battle had probably taken place there. A student with the surname Gao caused a huge explosion, and all the students there were eliminated, said the member who had been arranged to pass by. All eliminated? Then Wang Ling. Oh, you mean that student with dead fish eyes? He was blown away by the blast of the explosion and wasn't affected. After saying that, the member directly left on his flying sword. Hearing this, Nan Yixio and the others were suddenly enlightened. Because of the special terrain of Mist Peak, there was an updraft around it, so when people landed around Mist Peak, it was as if they were equipped with parachutes. It was also because of this that Wang Ling had been able to land safely after being blown away by the blast of air, and had even brought Wang Zhen back with him in the end? After sorting out the cause and effect of the incident, Nan Yixio looked at Wang Ling in astonishment. Everyone said that this was number 60 High's mascot. Now that Nan Yixio had come back to his senses, seeing was indeed believing. As expected of Wang Ling, the legendary mascot could really be this lucky. As expected of classmate Wang Ling, Nan Yixio couldn't help giving him a thumbs up as he marveled at Wang Ling's amazing performance. On the other side, Lotus Sun had actually been worried about Wang Ling's condition. Now that she saw him return safe and sound with Wang Zhen, she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She had been especially nervous when she hadn't seen Wang Ling just now, and was even ready to call for the family's personal guards to go into the mountains and search for him. This was a privilege that only Lotus Sun had. Because of Shadow Stream's previous assassination attempt on Lotus Sun, President Qi had in fact approved Huagua Water Curtain Group's internal personnel to protect Lotus Sunday. Now these people were actually waiting not too far away. They couldn't intervene in the competition, but they could protect Lotus Sun if necessary. But she actually didn't care too much about her own safety. As long as Wang Ling was fine, she could accept it. Lotus Sun hadn't arranged for these bodyguards entirely out of her own consideration. There were so many students at number 60 High, and as the team leader, she naturally had the responsibility to protect them. As long as you're fine. So, when she saw that everyone was safe and sound, she smiled. Out of the corner of her eye, she looked at Wang Ling's face, which was as tranquil as ever, and felt a trace of peace in her heart. The night of the second day of the national competition passed peacefully with Wang Ling's return. All the major peaks on Nine Dragon Mountain knew that number 60 High had sent a mascot to get rid of Mist Peak's camp, which was led by number 1 Devil Subduing High. While everyone was astonished, they took all kinds of precautions against Fire Peak. Many camps had previously planned to besiege Fire Peak, but all of them had been cancelled. The main reason was that they felt that number 60 high was a little strange. It seemed that nothing good would ever happen to them. In the middle of the night, in the girls' tent, Lotus Sun sensed that Lu Qingyi was a little uneasy. In many cases, girls' minds were transparent, and they could understand each other's thoughts. It's my turn to keep watch. Sitting next to Lu Qingyi with a blanket draped over her, Lotus Sun served her the hot fruit tea that she had prepared earlier. Lu Qingyi stared blankly for a moment, then reached out to take the tea. As she held it in her palm, the fragrant tea leaves gave off steam. After inhaling the sweet aroma, Lu Qingyi felt a lot calmer. Sugar could stimulate dopamine, which could help people get rid of anxiety. The two women sat side by side, hugging their knees as they held the hot tea. Lu Qingyi drank the fruit tea with a heavy heart. Then Lotus Sun asked straight away, "Are you worried about classmate Wang Zhen?" "Of course not. Don't talk nonsense." These words were obviously spot on. Lu Qingyi's face instantly turned red, and even the tips of her ears turned red. "Actually, sometimes if you really care you should go and take a look," Lotus Sun reminded her. I just think there's something wrong with Wang Zhen." Lu Qingyi lowered her head with a depressed expression. "After he came back he didn't say anything, nor did he bicker with me. It's a little strange." Lotus Sun nodded. Even she could tell that classmate Wang Zhen's behavior had become a little wooden, and he was in a daze like a wooden man. Could he have been scared silly by Gao Tianming? "I heard that the explosion at Mist Peak was pretty violent. If it wasn't for the protective golden talisman, he would have been seriously injured," Lotus Sun guessed. Lu Qingyi didn't respond. She was well aware that the whole story probably wasn't that simple. Wang Zhen was thick-skinned and coarse. Lu Qingyi could indeed feel his character from living with him in Wei Ji's house. Actually, after getting along with him for a while, she didn't think he was as annoying as he seemed. This person who had come down from the domain of the gods with the same goal of escaping marriage as her, could even be quite reliable sometimes. At the very least, he made her feel responsible as a man. Emotions had always been a very complicated matter. Lu Qingyi felt that this wasn't something a young girl could understand. There was an age gap between her and Lotus Sun, so Lu Qingyi wasn't willing to share her worries with anyone. But Lotus Sun had hit the nail on the head. As a result, Lu Qingyi gradually relaxed her guard. Maybe she really was too concerned about age? "What does it feel like to like someone?" Lu Qingyi asked in a low voice. "When you like someone you're always concerned about them and worried about them. Even if they're looking at the sky you're worried that the stars will fall and hit them," Lotus Sun said to Lu Qingyi as she looked at Wang Ling, who was looking up at the night sky. Chapter 1174. When Lotus Sun said this, Wang Ling was gazing at the night sky. Although she spoke very quietly, he still heard her. The expression on his face didn't change, and he looked a little wooden as he twitched his ears. Wang Ling enjoyed this quiet time very much. Of course, he wasn't looking at the sky simply to gaze at the starry sky, but to prevent the giant meteorites from invading Earth. Late at night, when no one knew, Wang Ling would often observe the movements near Earth. Once he encountered a meteorite on a trajectory that was destined to collide with the Earth, he would use the great sky-gazing spell like he was doing now, and use the power of his king's eye to send it flying back. Thus, when a lot of scientists carried out astronomical observations, they would find that the meteorites that were supposed to collide with the Earth deviated due to the influence of another force of gravity. It was very likely that this was Wang Ling's doing. Wang Ling had been silently maintaining world peace all this time. On the other side, the fake Wang Zhen that Wang Ling had created using Gao Tianming's puppet sat not far away and was also gazing at the sky. Lu Qingyi and the others couldn't see through this level of illusion at all, even if they felt it through skin contact, because this kind of powerful illusion made it feel especially real. Of course, this wasn't without its drawbacks. It was indeed a little wooden. This was because the puppet itself didn't have spiritual intelligence. It could only change its appearance but not its intelligence. It might be better to use the Great Separation spell to create a clone of Wang Zhen, whose personality would be closer to the original Wang Zhen's, but this way Wang Zhen's battle strength would be reduced. The enemy that Wang Zhen was about to face could be said to be extraordinarily powerful. If Wang Zhen's battle strength was reduced in this situation, it wouldn't be good for him. So he had no other choice. But what Wang Ling didn't expect was that eldest Miss Lu, who had been bickering with Wang Zhen all this time, suddenly seemed to be concerned about his condition. This puzzled Wang Ling. Their relationship should have been one of hostility and hostility, but now it seemed that it had developed into a more complicated relationship. On the cliff, Wang Ling used the great sky-gazing spell to clean up the giant meteorites that were speeding toward Earth. He got up and brushed the dust off his butt, then left the space for Lu Qingyi, who was anxiously waiting behind him. On the other side, after struggling in her heart for a long time, Lu Qingyi finally sat next to Wang Zhen at Lotus Sun's encouragement. She looked at Wang Zhen's lifeless face, and her heart suddenly ached for him. A good person, how did he become a little fool who was like a vegetative person? Wang Zhen. Lu Qingyi tried to call out, but the fake Wang Zhen didn't respond at all. Wang Ling observed the two of them in secret. At the entrance to the boys' tent, he noticed that Lotus Sun was also secretly watching them from the entrance to the girls' tent. He could see that Lotus Sun's face was clearly a little red, as if there was some envy in it. Dozens of seconds later, Lu Qingyi very naturally leaned her head on Wang Zhen's shoulder in the night breeze on the edge of the cliff. On the other side, Wang Zhen, who was carrying out a mission with Little Silver and Loopy Toad, inexplicably felt a heavy weight on his shoulders, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on them. "Are you nervous?" Little Silver sensed that Wang Zhen's expression seemed especially grave. "A little." Wang Zhen nodded and frowned. In theory, he shouldn't be feeling this heavy. Could it be that this was the first time Ling Jinren had personally appointed him to carry out a mission, and he was feeling too much pressure? "It was the same when I received a mission from Master for the first time. Just relax. In any case, if we really can't solve it, Master will always show up at the most suitable time," Little Silver said. "Ling Jinren, will he really take action?" Wang Zhen was a little stunned. He had thought that this mission was Wang Ling's test for him, and he had to succeed. Now that he heard Little Silver's idea, he instantly felt the happiness of having a powerful backer behind him. But Wang Zhen would still take this mission seriously. He represented the domain of the gods. If someone from the domain of the gods couldn't even solve a problem on Earth, that would truly be a disgrace to the domain of the gods. People could have backers, but they couldn't rely on them forever. They still had to move forward step by step with a humble and peaceful heart. You've probably run into very strong opponents in the domain of the gods, right? The three of them sped through the jungle, leaping from tree trunk to tree trunk as they hovered in the air, nimbly using the surrounding terrain to cover themselves. As long as you had the power of Shadow Dao, you could freely use the shadows to hide your figure and even your aura. The power of Shadow Dao is really amazing. The more Wang Zhen felt about it, the more he felt how powerful Shadow Dao was. As a great Dao, Shadow Dao's shortcomings were very obvious, but this was because Wang Yuan hadn't been born yet, so Wang Yuan couldn't control Shadow Dao very well. However, the advantage of Shadow Dao was even more obvious. It could strengthen one's shadow and turn it into combat strength, so that it could catch the enemy off guard and injure them in battle. "I have a feeling that our enemy will be very strong," Loopy Toad said as they moved forward. Loopy Toad said as they moved forward. As far as it knew, Wang Ling had never asked them to individually strengthen each of them before carrying out a mission. This proved that Wang Ling had a feeling that the enemy they were going to face would be very troublesome. "I know." Wang Zhen nodded solemnly. So far, this mastermind behind the scenes had resurrected a number of people who were already dead, including vicious dark network criminals as well as vengeful spirits of the dead who wreaked havoc in the dark. Their current understanding of the other party was indeed very limited. Resurrection definitely wasn't the other party's only ability. If the other party also has Shadow Dao, what kind of ability would it be? Wang Zhen suddenly asked a question worth thinking about. "We won't know until we meet him." Little Silver and Loopy Toad were also worried. Because they didn't know the other party, they didn't know what on earth would happen next. "I have a guess," Wang Zhen said at that moment. "Let's hear it," asked Loopy Toad. "Bringing the dead back to life is a heaven-defying act. There's bound to be a price to pay for using such a forbidden spell. The other party has resurrected so many people, logically speaking, it's impossible for him to be completely fine." "Makes sense. But in other words, if the other party is really fine, then there's actually only one other possibility." Wang Zhen frowned. "This person might not be from the same dimension as us. Or perhaps he's from a different universe." But Wang Zhen felt that there was actually a loophole in this explanation. Because if the person behind the scenes was someone from a different universe as the Keeper of Order, how could Gu Xuanji not sense it? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.